Eureka! You found us! Welcome to the CheckOut California radio show, your key to California hospitality. Hosted by Rad Gantos, principal of Rad Gantos and Associates, a hospitality and commercial real estate design firm. And Craig Sullivan, Chief Development Officer of Broughton Hotels, a boutique hotel management company. CheckOut California is focused on our state's hospitality, travel, and tourism markets, and on the large part they play in California's vibrant and innovative economic diversity and unique quality of life. Now, here are your hosts, Rad Gantos and Craig Sullivan.
Good afternoon and welcome to CheckOut California. I'm Craig Sullivan. This is our very special guest, Jenny Redlin from Partner Engineering and Sciences. And Mr. Rad Gantos is MIA, except we do know he's in Vegas. So he's been there all week working a conference. And Rad, how are you feeling?
I'm feeling good, and I cannot confirm or deny that I'm in Vegas.
We can. I've got a live video feed. We've hacked into the system. We saw
don't
everything.
Believe everything that you see. Don't believe everything that you're seeing.
What happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Not anymore. It's all on the internet.
Obviously not. Right?
So I'm very, very happy to have Jenny Redlin with us. Jenny is one of the principals behind Partner Engineering and Science. And they are a third-party reporting company that works nationally but has a heavy focus here in California in both commercial real estate and the hospitality sector. Jenny, welcome to the show. I want to start off with one thing before we really get into you giving us your bio. We've had a horrible time in Northern California and Southern California with fires. A very good friend of mine, Sonny Patel, and his family are amongst the victims of the fires up in Northern California. He and his family have lived in a hotel that they've owned for over 20 years, raised their kids in this hotel, and they got burned out. Luckily, everybody was okay. They're safe. They're devastated right now, like so many others up there. And please know that we are all thinking of you, and you are in our prayers. And hopefully a speedy recovery for our fellow Californians in both Northern and Southern California. So now that I've sucked the oxygen out of the room.
Before you bring the oxygen back in, I'd like to also reach out. I'm at this conference here in Vegas, and it's a spa industry conference. It's actually the largest spa industry conference that we have, and you could tell the vibe. There's a lot of people that were impacted that are in hospitality in Puerto Rico, in Florida. There's people that I know that I've known for over 20 years who lost their home. It burned down completely to the only thing standing is the chimney stack and the stone frame around the front door in Northern California and Sonoma area, and it's just very tragic. Like you're saying, we know that people will rise. These are high caliber people. They will rise like phoenixes, but it's just I can't even begin to imagine the loss on the personal level, emotional level. So our hearts do go out to them, and definitely keeping them in our prayers.
Absolutely. Jenny, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and your company, please?
Sure. I was just going to say something about the fires. That some of these stories that you're hearing coming out now. People, treading water in pools while the flames are burning around them, and I just can't imagine anything more frightening. And we're lucky that so many people were able to escape.
Okay. Exactly.
Yeah, so on to a lighter note. My name is Jenny Redlin with Partner Engineering and Science, and like Craig said, we are a nationwide environmental engineering and energy consulting firm for commercial real estate, and clearly hospitality is one of the sectors that we service. I personally love the hospitality industry. It's very dynamic. They always have really great projects to work on, and usually in fun places. So.
Are you ready for it, Rad? It's in our DNA. I say that every show. It is in our DNA.
We need some sort of like sound effect, Paul, when he says that. I don't know where it's just
What
like
sound
a
does
drop the
DNA
mic.
make?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
no, Jenny. It's more like what sound does
There you
what
go,
sound does
Paul.
what
There you
sound
go.
does Craig make? That's a little dated though. That's kind of gong show. I think you need to drop the mic or something.
No,
Okay,
not that one.
okay. I'll shut up, Paul. I'll shut up.
So, Jenny, as a provider of third-party reports, commercial real estate transactions nationwide, and focusing in on California and the hotel sector in particular, what kind of activity are you seeing out there? What's driving those deals right now that you and your firm are involved with? Is it development? Is it refinances? Is it sales? All of the above?
I mean, it's all of the above, but I would say the majority of things that we're involved in is definitely the refinances. I think people are still taking advantage of the historic low interest rates and just repositioning their current assets. And then I'd say secondarily, construction. So hot still. I have seen a small downturn of late. So less new projects. We're still very active in a lot of projects that have, already gotten legs and are off the ground.
Yeah.
But a little slower startup on the new things. People are still saucing out new locations, though. I'm getting calls every day still to, I'm thinking about this one. Let's go take a look, that type of thing. But yeah, generally speaking, hospitality is still hot as opposed to, maybe 10 years ago when
It was in the
little
tank.
activity.
Yeah, a little less activities being kind. Now, with your third-party reports you're doing, and I'd like you to explain this to our audience for sure, because we've got principals out there that are listening, and they may not know of all of your services. So I'd like to have you give them a little bit of background on each service you do provide. And if you're a deal person, send in a question to us. Paul, would you give them your Twitter page and they can tweet in a question to us live?
Very simply, they can go to OC Talk Radio, so hashtag OC Talk Radio. We'll check the Twitter feed. They can also, if they so desire, no, because Rod's on the phone. We only have one in line here. So yeah, do that or send anything, email Paul at octalkradio.net.
And he is also our administrative assistant, so he can book you on the show as well. No, just kidding.
He looks cute in he looks cute in cargo shorts. And, he's always showing some leg.
Jenny's making a funny face as you say that. I'm not sure she agrees there.
He does have cargo shorts.
Well, what can I tell you, Jenny? This is the way it rolls around here. But listen,
we do have fun here.
Paul, if we're live feeding on YouTube, I think, at least, right?
Yes, we're live on YouTube. We can go to OC Talk Radio's YouTube channel or OC Facebook. Just look up OC Talk Radio, and we're on there as well.
Yes, we are.
So for people that are listening, and I do apologize for hogging the incoming phone line, but you can always send us messages or ask us questions while we're on there with Jenny here on those two stations on YouTube or on Facebook, and we'll try to basically incorporate those into our remaining
operators standing by.
There we go. So, Jenny, back to your services. Could you tell us what services you're offering? I know you're doing Alta surveys and maybe going to that in the phase 1 and everything else that your firm's doing, please.
Yeah, basically, I kind of like to put it into two different buckets. So there's the folks out there that are interested in buying existing product, right? So it's already built. Maybe they're going to, change a flag or something like that. But it's an existing asset. So on projects like that, we're usually brought in, and when we say due diligence, there's a lot of due diligence that you need to do on a commercial real estate transaction. Looking at the books, seeing if it pencils. That's not the type of due diligence that we're doing. We're really the physical due diligence company. We're looking at the actual property itself. So if it has to do with something, about the building, about the dirt it's sitting on, you're likely going to call me.
Right.
So we're doing, like you mentioned, the phase 1 environmental site assessment, making sure that there's no contamination either nearby or on your property. We're doing the property condition assessment. How's the HVAC? How's the plumbing? How's the roof? All those types of
Very
things.
critical, especially when you've got a 30, 40-year-old hotel at this point.
Absolutely. And looking for the low-hanging fruit. How is this asset performing? If you're already planning on renovations, maybe your renovation budget is already going to take care of some of the deferred maintenance items on the building. Maybe you're going to think about negotiating price. So the property condition assessment can be a great tool for that as well.
Absolutely.
And then on the flip side, if you're selling that asset, you might want to call me too and have that property condition assessment done before you bring it to market so you don't get retraded.
Don't get a haircut. That's right.
The Alta survey clearly as well. And then especially important for the hotels are the ADA surveys.
Now, is that taking up most of your time, the ADA surveys, the phase 1, the mechanicals, alphas? Is that really the backbone of what you're doing right now?
Yeah, absolutely. For the hotel industry specifically, I think that's definitely what we're focusing on. I would say, really, as a company, our environmental assessments in infill areas. You're hard pressed to find a piece of property these days that doesn't have some sort of old issue.
Right.
An old gas station that used to be there. Old hotels are notorious for having dry cleaning operations.
There you go. Just going to say
back in
dry
the day,
cleaners, with a plant.
I mean, great idea, to service your clients.
Right.
Horrible idea from an environmental standpoint.
Yeah. Now that would have been the older, full service properties in the 60s, 50s. Not so much in the 70s, 80s, and 90s certainly, but when all that stuff went out from under the roof of the hotel, but certainly prior to that, when you had corporate America traveling. I need to get my suit pressed. I need to have my shirts cleaned. I'm going to be here for a week and get a series of meetings.
Yeah,
So.
Overnight dry cleaning, heck yeah, right?
Exactly.
But everyone's smarter than that now. They don't do that on site anymore because of all the environmental implications. So I would say that's definitely, those are the services that we're providing, existing inventory for sure.
Absolutely. Now, Brad, you got any questions yet?
I was going to actually, just for the benefit of the listeners, I know we're talking about this from the prospect of engineering, but we are talking about ADA. It's been in effect since, I think was Jenny, correct me, was it 1990 when it was first implemented?
Oh, now you're putting me on the spot here, Rad. Oh my goodness.
Okay, let me take you off the spot. I think
that was before her time.
At least from the early 90s, and because I remember when I was going to design school. I'm aging myself, but that's another show.
Older than dirt.
That's a total, yeah. It is very much the case. But I just wanted to add to our conversation that's happening. This is such a critical thing that you have consultants and experts in the field actually helping you versus people that are just supposedly have some knowledge base. You need people that are qualified to help you with this, because I will tell you there's been a rash of ADA compliancy lawsuits that are not even engineering based when it comes to hotel properties. They're ones that are basically access of website and navigation of website not being accessible in the way it is designed. Yes. So this ADA compliancy thing, we are talking about it today specifically with the expert position from engineering and physical property. But this is no joke. And in many cases, these lawsuits come fast and furious from attorneys that are basically looking to just blanket things. So at the very least, get somebody like Jenny and her firm that are experts in this to protect yourself, at least in your physical environment. But you really, really, really should not be messing around with this if you're a hotel property.
Yeah, not at all. And I think that's a great segue, Rad. Thank you. Jenny, why don't you go in a little bit more detail about the ADA surveys and compliance issues and remedies that you're seeing out there right now with the hotels?
Yeah, definitely. I think the first and foremost step is know your exposure. you don't know until you know. So have
Right.
someone out there to take a look, let you, and even if you don't have the funds to fix it immediately, if it's a large ticket item, you can fix the low-hanging fruit, the super visible things. Maybe
Signs in the parking lot.
signs in the parking lot. These
ADA
lawsuits, they just do drive-bys. So the things on the exterior of the property are usually the ones that get flagged first. So exactly, the parking.
Yeah.
And very easy to restripe a parking spot, that type of thing.
Well, and don't you have to hang the sign at 2 different levels? One for a bus and one for a car or a van and a car?
Right, exactly, in different specific areas. I
Yeah.
mean, there's all sorts of things, and then you get into the interior of the property, and how high the doorknobs have to be, the different railings, all of those different things really make a difference. And like I said, you can make some of those fixes for very little money.
Yeah.
And really decrease your exposure.
Yeah, a lot of times you could have the hotel engineer take care of that, or you could bring in a Park West general contractors or somebody else into it. So I think you're right.
Well, and if I may add also that, we said a minute ago that, it was in effect, let's say it went into effect 1990s, but there's been actual updates and major updates to the ADA regulations and the American with Disabilities Act over time, including a recent one a few years ago. And so just because you're a property that may have been ADA compliant at the time that it was built, and I see this happening from my interiors perspective, these properties go through PIP projects, property improvement projects, and they basically go in and they start messing around with a few things. And I had a case last week. Actually, I talked to Jenny a little bit about it, and for the benefit of the client. And it was like, this is an existing property. It has a food and beverage outlet in it. It's been 15 years. They had a design package that was submitted for renovation that actually did not account for any of the recent updates to the ADA code. And when asked, they said, we thought it was grandfathered in.
Oh.
It is not grandfathered
No,
in.
not at all.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's the most, I have this conversation. If I hear grandfathered in one more time from one of my clients,
Right.
they all assume that. And it's like, no, true that a renovation project usually spurs you
That'll
to
trigger it,
have
yeah.
to update, but that doesn't mean the liability's not there. You
Exactly.
can still get sued.
Yeah, no, it does. And again, I mean, it's a cottage industry down in San Diego. Last time I heard, San Diego was the capital of ADA lawsuits being filed. There's a group of attorneys that's all they do. And I think, being an asset manager, being a lender, I think that's something, and being an owner, that's something that you need to review on a at least a 2-year basis. And
Craig, let me just add this. It's funny. I've been hearing this, and I'm sure we all have been hearing this from the early 90s when this ADA code came in. It was like this. Now I have an albatross around my neck as a developer or a builder or a property that's a commercial property, and basically everybody's looking at this stuff and saying, I don't want to deal with this. What's the quickest way I can get this thing to go away and not deal with it? It's going to be costly. It's going to stifle my ability to basically design a property, whatever. The funny thing about this, actually, as we have an aging population in certain markets, is in fact there are opportunities when you are faced with having to do modifications that can improve the experience of the spaces. I mean, the case in point is the one that we were just talking about. They had a problem because they had a stand-up bar. There was no handicap or ADA compliant height counter for 2 seats at least in a bar situation, right? Well, here's what's funny. We spent a week going back and forth where they were resisting. Then we said, why don't we just lower the whole one side of the bar to where you have now a little bit more, almost like a sushi restaurant kind of setting, and now you have a dining experience that goes beyond, and at the same time, you have met the requirements for ADA, and all of a sudden it has a new experience that is now built into existing facility.
creative thinking,
So
outside the box.
It really all depends on how you approach the question. Exactly.
No, good call. Good call.
Build it into the design. It's
Are
It can
you-
be a part of the solution, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Be a part of the solution. Jenny, are you having any input with any of the brands, with the Hiltons, the Marriotts, the Hyatts of the world, IHGs? Are they calling you as experts to help them out with their property improvement plans or anything like that?
Yeah, the way we get involved with PIPs, the property improvement plans, is more on when a property is changing hands.
Yeah.
And the new owner wants to fly one of those flags.
Yeah.
So then we're presented with Marriott or such and such's PIP and build it into our property condition assessment. And kind of marry the two and say, hey, look, you're with your property condition assessment, these systems are aging anyways, and guess what? The PIP calls for low flow,
PTAX,
whatever the
toilets,
heck it is, whatever it is that they like. And so we kind of marry those two. Another thing that we've been effective in doing too is a lot of the owners, the PIPs are somewhat negotiable.
Right.
So we can help them kind of meld and find more cost-effective solutions in negotiating their PIPs with
Just
the
like
flag.
Rad's solution with this local OC hotel. That's the great thing about having a designer. Yeah. How long is it taking you to do your surveys? Let's say, and I've recommended you for years to various clients all over the place, and always will, and looking at a couple of things myself right now, and hopefully we'll get you involved with that if we can get them under contract. But let's just say I want you to do a phase 1, an alpha survey. I'm really not going to be concerned about the mechanics of the property. Let's say I'm going to tear it down,
anyways,
and I'm going to do a 4-story, 4 to 6 story hotel. And it's pretty straightforward. I'll do the underground parking and the podium and go from there. So how long does it usually take you to complete all these assignments once you've got them under contract?
Sure. Your baseline, you're kind of like go, no go. I want to put this under contract before you go hard, essentially. Right. You're usually looking at about a 3-week time period. Okay. Although right now it's really a seller's market, and buyers are getting completely pressured to perform much more quickly and to go hard faster.
Right.
Which means that we have to perform faster. So we're getting things done 2 weeks, even 1 week sometimes.
That's what I was going to say, because typically, right now what I'm seeing on the hotel side is you've got, usually, you could have anywhere from a 15 to 30 day due diligence period, but you're probably getting in closer to the 15 day.
Yeah.
And then
it's
a
crazy
30 day
when
is
45 to 60
right.
used to be the norm. Time frames are definitely crunched.
Yeah.
But we have good relationships with our clients. We know what's happening in the market, and we are getting it done for them.
Absolutely. And now you've worked with a multitude of lenders, not just the local, commercial banks, but also the national, the Wall Street firms, and all of that. Can you give us some of the nuances, some of the differences that you're seeing, with a Wall Street firm versus the community bank and the national bank?
Sure. I think generally speaking, the community banks, the smaller lenders, have less due diligence requirements. Okay. So a lot of maybe smaller owners that are just relying on what their lender says they need are maybe not doing all the due diligence that they really should be doing.
Yeah.
So, that's great. Just realize that. Your lender says, hey, actually, I don't even need a phase 1. Don't worry about it. I just run this environmental checksy thing and we're good.
Wow. That's kind of scary.
It is scary. And then these people who maybe it's their first property they've ever bought, and they don't even realize that a phase 1 is actually protection against circle liability in the future. And so they don't get that almost insurance policy, essentially.
Right. Exactly.
So I see that, which is not great. And then, of course, it goes all the way whenever I call it OPM, when you're using other people's money.
Yeah.
Then all of the due diligence requirements just start stacking up.
Absolutely.
Actually, one thing we didn't talk about, which we really should because we're here in California, is the seismic assessments.
Let's do that. We're going to go to a break right now. Our engineer is going to play a couple of random commercials, and then we'll be back. We get dead air.
Good job, guys.
Not only my co-host and our guest today, But I'd also like to thank Park West General Contractors for sponsoring today's show. Edward LaCivita and Chris Hostard over there. This is a great commercial and hospitality general contracting firm. They work throughout the western United States. Lots of experience. They've done close to 500,000 square feet of creative office space here in Southern California, and hotel PIPs and repositioning both open and closed assets throughout the western U.S. So I think Paul's just about ready for the commercial. So go to parkwestgc.com and tell Ed and Chris that you heard Craig Sullivan talking about their firm. Thank you.
He used to pester me for a walk. Now, it's the other way around. Hoag physicians perform more orthopedic procedures than any other hospital in Orange County. Our orthopedic program, in fact, ranks among the top 5 in the entire country. So whatever it is you live for, you can get back to it sooner. Because as it turns out, the best part of life is simply living it. Hoag for life. Visit us at www.hoag.org.
All right, back to the show.
Back to the show. Okay.
That's fast.
That was fast. We just got our headsets off and put them right back on. Okay, Jenny, let's go back to what you were talking about before the break, please. Seismic. And now,
earthquakes.
I just want to say something real quick on that. Is the city and county of Los Angeles got a tougher seismic requirement than the rest of the state, or are they?
So the state
same?
has no requirement.
Okay.
It's city by city.
Ah.
So San Francisco was the first one to put
After
out
the bridge
an
and
ordinance.
The marina area got.
Actually, it wasn't even all that long. It was 3 years ago now, I think.
Okay.
So they put out an ordinance for, and mind you, there's always been laws in place through the building code.
Right.
So the building code gets updated usually after a major earthquake
Right.
event, and we go, oh yeah, we thought that would stand up well, and whoops, it didn't. And then they reconfigure things and then issue a new building code. So
like
after
that. Whoops, it didn't.
Literally after every major earthquake event, a new building code gets
comes
issued.
out. Okay.
So, generally speaking, newer buildings are built, to the newer building code and will hopefully sustain an earthquake better than older buildings. But more recently, both San Francisco, Los Angeles, Santa Monica, Oakland, tons and tons of smaller cities are adopting seismic ordinances, which require specific types of buildings to be retrofitted. LA's ordinance is targeting soft story wood frame multifamily.
Wow.
And
There's a ton of that in the San Fernando Valley
so
and the
much.
west side.
I grew up in the valley. There wasn't an apartment building without a tuck under parking spot.
Right.
And whoever thought that would fare
Right.
well in an earthquake event? I mean, they're little poles. Of course it's going to fall
down. Yeah. Wow.
And then the second thing is the concrete tilt-up buildings, so the very large, industrial spaces,
yeah.
Warehouses. The roofs just tend to collapse right in. And both of those have building age dates, so basically pre-80. It's 78 and 79, but basically anything 80 on is not getting affected by the ordinance. Doesn't mean that it won't fall down in an earthquake, but
And it doesn't mean that it won't change in the future after the
Won't
next
change in the
earthquake. There's the
future.
oops factor again.
But these, people are getting notices in the mail, and it's a big deal. Now, clearly, hotel properties probably are not going to experience a forced retrofit at this point.
Right.
But because it is such a public space, having a building that will withstand an earthquake event, you can hire an engineer like us to do a study to show you, kind of model how it would fare in an earthquake event.
Wow. That's a great idea. Now, you don't see a lot of hotels with tuck under parking, for one. It could have been a little boutique. Bless you, my friend.
Sorry, buddy.
In West LA, let's say it's been converted to a little boutique hotel.
Yeah, that would be possible.
Yeah, so what are some of the fixes for this?
Sure. They for the tuck under, they have kind of steel framing that they have manufactured for this exact purpose, and they
Okay.
put it into place. So it's just extra bracing of the buildings.
Okay.
So reinforcing it.
Now, will that
So
cause
Jenny,
you to
you-
lose any of the parking spaces?
Great question. That's always on everyone's mind
Yeah.
because clearly parking is an issue. Typically not.
Okay.
You usually lose only a few inches, and typically that's not enough to put a parking spot out of commission.
Okay, good. I was going to say, well, if it isn't, all of a sudden that becomes where the bicycles go if you're renting those, or
Some
the
other
motorcycle
use.
parking, something. But,
Yeah.
yeah,
But
I
then
mean,
parking affects zoning, affects.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a big problem.
absolutely.
Can be.
What about fire regulations? I mean, especially with the recent fires.
As far as like ordinances and whatnot,
Yeah,
honestly,
do you,
the fire regulations are from the building code perspective. That big London fire that
Right.
they had afterwards. Like everyone was like, "Oh my goodness, how did that even happen? How could
yeah.
they possibly not have sprinkler systems and all those types of
Right.
things?" So I would say, there was a lot of discussion around that, and do we have it here? And the answer, generally speaking, is yes.
Yes.
Clearly, the older it is, the less of a chance. There are checks on these sorts of things, so they've probably been caught and forced to upgrade. So typically speaking, you should be okay.
Right.
But fire life safety, that is one of the assessments we do along with our PCA. We're looking at that type of thing.
As you should be. I mean, not only for the ownership perspective, but the brand perspective. Marriott's got the toughest. It's module 13, I think, out of their PIP. Fire life safety is the most stringent in the industry, as it should be. They go well beyond city ordinances in many cases. You've also got this case where you've got some buildings that were converted, and it's the owners, it's the brands, lenders have got to be driving that, the insurance carriers. So all of that has got to be something that you factor into and work with all those various entities throughout the due diligence period, and especially the insurance carrier to be, or the lender that's been engaged have got questions, and then you're on the hot seat. You've got to come through and give them the answers that they not necessarily want to hear, but have to hear.
Right.
And the new owner's going to have to hear that as well.
Yeah,
So,
and I think that's, you make a good point with the lender, kind of the lender-driven requirements, again, back to that, versus the owner-driven requirements. A lot of times the lenders will have specific things that they want to key in on that you as an owner either don't care as much about or should care more about than your lender does.
Yeah.
So just be aware of that. Again, just because whatever your lender wants should not necessarily drive what due diligence package you should be getting, and you should not necessarily share all of your information with your lender.
there you go. Paul's got a question for you, Jenny.
Yeah, one of them, we had a tweet that came in, and I think it was in response to what Craig just said about the chain exceeding local regulations. The point that, and I've heard Rod talk about this a lot through the years. Why is it everybody's trying to do the minimum? Why not do more than the minimum to avoid the litigation, to avoid the loss, to avoid the bad reputation that comes with all? Why are they always just trying to get away with as little as possible?
Well, you know what, Paul?
Is it just money?
I think that's a point of view that I really don't adhere to. The glass with me is always half full. I always want to know more. I appreciate that Marriott does have such a stringent fire life safety protocol. That's probably one of many reasons that help them grow worldwide. I think basically everybody does want to do the right thing. Now, do you have a scenario where corporations and that always getting back to the shareholder and the profits come into conflict with doing the right thing? Yeah, that does happen, unfortunately. But I think I think the insurance carriers, the lenders, the owners that you're seeing today, especially out of corporate America, and these private LLCs like I'm part of, we take that very, very seriously, a lot more so than you saw 20 years ago, certainly 15 years ago. That fire in London, the fire in Vegas a number of years ago. We had a fire in Long Beach a few years ago in a high-rise apartment or condo tower on Ocean Avenue in between Pine Avenue, but closer to 2nd Street, where you lost a few floors there. And, that horrible fire in Oakland, was it last year, where they took a warehouse and basically converted it into illegal housing. So, you're unfortunately always going to have some that try and skirt safety. I think it's deplorable. I think it's absolutely horrible. But you've also got companies, Disney, globally. They're at all their theme parks. Their safety and everything is paramount. Cleanliness is another thing. I think you find that at Marriott, Hilton, IHG, boutique hotels, Wyndham, Red Roof. Everybody is concerned about that, and there is a collective to do the best that you possibly can. I really believe that.
But Rod's talked about even the ADA, where people come in and say, well, what's, like you were talking about earlier, what's the minimum I can do? Oh, my goodness, I don't want to do all this stuff. I'm just going to make it okay and get
That's
through.
why our ADA laws have gotten so stringent. So now you don't have the choice. We over-regulate once we get to that point. But
let me add my 2 cents, as my name is being bantered around here as a person.
No, you're sick. Not in the studio. You don't get a chance to talk.
No bantering. Okay, but you picked the wrong show if you're thinking no bantering.
Yeah.
But I think, Paul, in my experience, I understand, and I have this very, very strong kind of like sense of I want, just like Craig, and Jenny, that we want to kind of do the right thing. We'd like to see people kind of do the right thing. However, I will say this: I think in many cases, we as professionals, we have the responsibility to educate that client, to educate that person who's looking at that property in a manner that is proactive about what some of these things that they are looking at in a negative manner can be if they just switch their look at it or their perspective on it. And in some cases, it actually could make a property that's underperforming change dramatically, but they're just not looking at it that way. So I think our responsibility sometimes is to tell that client something that may be difficult to tell them, but that is why they are hiring us.
Exactly.
And I think that's what differentiates certain consultants from others, is that we are willing to put that relationship we have with that client at risk temporarily for what is in their best interest.
In their best interest. Jenny and I are both shaking our heads yes, so I don't know if you can see that on the Facebook Live or YouTube.
I can. I thought you guys were having.
But there must be
having a little seismic tremor or something.
I'll give one last shot at my cynicism here, but there must be consultants out there that when I go shopping, the one says, you got to do this, and I'm saying, I'm going to go to another one. They say, well, maybe we can get away by doing this, and that's how they win the job.
Well, that's,
I think you have to frame it right. You say, hey, look, this is, for instance, let's take the seismic, because that's a good illustration of this. So the ordinance says that you have to do, you have to strengthen it, let's say, every third opening, right? Yeah. So the ordinance is really out there to protect life and safety. So LA City is saying, look, we just want to make sure that our citizens can walk away out of that building.
Right.
So that's great. And if you just don't want to get penalized by the city if you don't do the ordinance, then I can design this retrofit for that purpose. However, you also are an owner of this asset that you want to be able to rent out after a big earthquake event.
Absolutely.
Right.
Keep your cash flow going. So I'm still appealing to them as owners, not just, hey, let's spend money just to spend money. But you want this, you want your ROI still coming in the door.
Yeah.
So really, if I can retrofit this, spend a little more money, make this even safer for your tenants, and preserve collateral.
And part of the checks and balances are also going to be your insurance carrier and your lender.
Right. Yeah. Maybe your insurance will go down.
Right.
It'll be easier to get a loan. All
Not
those
in violation of your loan
things.
covenants of the existing loan because you haven't adhered to life safety or health safety codes. So yeah, good points, Jenny. Thank you. Hey, let's talk about the green components. You're doing a lot of SBA loans where there's a green component with that now.
Sure.
So, what type of products are you offering to help them achieve that additional cash out of a 504A?
Right. Yeah. So the SBA, they're actually a few different lending programs out there. There's the PACE one too, and
Right.
the SBA. For hotels specifically, there are other green lending programs for different commercial real estate types. So we have a sister company called Partner Energy. So we're Partner Engineering and Science, and we do all of the, building science and environmental, and then they're our energy arm. So they're doing the energy audits. They can get you certified green through a multitude of different programs. Clearly, LEED and Energy Star are the ones that everyone knows the best. But there's so many more out there that are maybe even more achievable and more
Interesting.
economical, and then will help qualify you for some of these green lending programs. So yeah, I find that the hotel industry specifically, because a lot of them are quote unquote owner users.
Yeah.
For the smaller guys in the Marriotts of the world, they're not doing that clearly. Yeah, and if you have a green, and a lot of these, we'll go through, do our energy audit, identify a whole bunch of different measures that you can take that will do two things. It will save on your energy bill.
Right.
Great, you're a hotel owner, you pay the energy bill.
Yeah, exactly.
These are not triple net. And also get you a better loan.
Yeah. And now imagine what your water bill is, because not only have you got everybody taking a shower, let's say you got 200 keys, you got everybody taking a shower at 7 a.m. You got a pool, you got jacuzzis, you've got laundry, okay? And that's running all day long. So, yeah, so that's a huge cost. Hey, Rad, on some of your designs, are you now factoring in the green components for your spas and other design assignments you're working on right now?
Very much so, and I think, and Jenny and I, when we were prepping for the show a little bit, I kind of threw out a little. I was trying to be a little bit of a, devil's advocate. Said, let's talk about green, but let's talk also about greenwashing, right? And that wasn't using a biodegradable detergent. That was cases where people are basically telling you to do certain things that at face value may look like you're being environmentally sensitive, but again, you aren't really. And that's where you need that expertise and that skilled professional to help you, especially if you're going for lead, because there's so much out there language-wise about green. And I see it a lot, especially when it comes to like spa projects, for example, or wellness centers, because now everybody's saying everything from what is on my skin to what I use in there to what I touch, and they're being sold a bill of goods in some cases. However, we're putting more and more emphasis on genuine and authentic ways of implementing green, because not only is it good for the environment, all that stuff that we talk about, it also has a strong market and brand positioning value. And so it differentiates properties from others. And if they can then tie in like their programming and their, in the case of spas, their treatment offerings or their wellness programs or whatever, to where they are environmentally sensitive, they are green, and then they give back to the local community, then you got this very integrated brand that lives the words that it says it stands for.
Or is that just monetizing something, another aspect of the hotel?
Well, I mean, again,
I'm not being cynical. I'm just, it's.
No. I absolutely agree with you. I mean,
and I am cynical, but not on this.
I think it's a smart thing to do. It kind of goes back to sort of similar situation we talked about with this particular bar situation in ADA. If you can find opportunities in things that you have to do and spend money on, and you can somehow quantify a return on that, be it value of promotion, marketing, better experience for the person that's in your space, all of those things are not just money that you're spending because either you have to or you think maybe it's the right thing to do. You're actually getting value back from it, including potential resale or making your property more appealing to somebody who's looking at basically buying.
There you go. There you go. See, now those are the things that I touch on. And, Jenny and I go back, before you were married. How long have you been married now?
7 years.
7
We've known
years.
each other probably 10 years.
Yeah, 10 years plus. And I've been singing that song about, LEED certification, being, having a green component at your hotels, because my feeling is this, and, I hope the Twittersphere just blows up over this. My feeling is this: if you do not use LEED or some other program when you are building a building, you are accelerating the obsolescence and you are not maximizing your value on that property. No matter if it's
Absolutely.
an apartment, a retail center, a hotel, a junior college, whatever it may be, a movie theater. You know, with the LEED certificate, and I'm going to use U.S. Green Building Council. Now, do you do the LEED certifications
We do.
in-house? Okay,
Yeah,
so there's another.
certify. Absolutely.
Perfect.
Energy Star, all of them.
Okay, so if you're under those programs from beginning to end and you get your certification, okay, my feeling is not only are you going to have an efficient building, you're going to have a comfortable building, you're going to have an envelope that works for the area that building is in, and you are going to make it something special, and you are going to be able to drive your ROI. And you know, at the end of the day, that's what we want. But I think
that'd be
it's a
such
great
an
idea.
easy sale.
You
know,
think?
so we started Partner Energy probably 7 years ago.
Yeah.
And uphill battle. I thought this would be the
Wow.
easiest thing in the world to
Yeah.
sell. Like not only you know, just kind of the feel good product. Clearly, you know, I'm a greenie. You know, I'm an environmental consultant by background. That's what I am.
How you started, yeah.
But all that aside,
Yeah.
it just makes dollars and cents.
Yeah.
That's what it makes. And
Exactly.
you would think that that'd be a really easy sale. But with these triple net properties, with hotels, that's why I think the hotel industry has gravitated to the green more than some of the other food groups in commercial real estate. But they're just like, hey, I don't pay the bill, I don't care.
Well, I think another part of it is too, is most government employees, whether it's military or the EPA or Treasury or anybody else, they are now requiring that you've got some sort of LEED or other program certification.
If you want a GSA tenant.
Right, yeah. So,
no, that's helpful too.
Yeah, that's
Absolutely.
helped out a lot. So,
but yeah, and then you know, if you look back, now we have enough of these products online that are quote unquote green. And you can look back and look at things like, you know, for the hotel industry, you know, service, quality, style, comfort. Did going green affect any of those? Because that was a concern.
Yeah.
But no, it's been around long enough now that they're saying, hey, look, we were easily able to achieve a 10 to 30% reduction without sacrificing any of those things.
Absolutely. I think it just makes sense all the way around. Now, I'm starting to hear a new buzzword. It's bluing instead of green. Is there another phase that's about ready to come out where blue is supposed to be more intense on these processes? Have you heard anything about
I
that?
have not
I think Red, weren't you
heard
with
that.
me when I heard that?
Yep, yes, absolutely, and that's actually what prompted our kind of cynicism to be heightened and going, oh, here we go again. Now we got another label, but yeah, you know, I think though, all cynicism aside, we've all been through this, right? It's baby steps, and so if years ago, if you said something like LEED to somebody, they pretty much thought you used a 4-letter word, right?
Yeah.
No, they
Now-
did the
Roll your
Robert
eyes.
Downey Jr. eye roll.
Yeah.
That's what that was.
Well, maybe you were dealing with better people than I was, but you know,
Of course,
the
they're
reaction
hotel
definitely
people.
was not positive. It's the company keeper. I understand. We'll have a different conversation about that one later when I get back home. The thing about it is that now that it has become more acceptable,
Yeah.
I think it's the nature of human beings, and I think that rightfully so. A lot of people are positively minded. They want to do the right thing. They want to leave things better than they found them. And so now it's like, well, what else can I do, right? And so I think, yes, we both heard that word, and it was very, very, very interesting for me because it sounded like it went beyond where we are now, that we are trying to actually achieve more by bluing.
Well, I'm gonna have to look into that term.
Good. Then we'll have you
immediately.
back. We'll have you
I'll
back.
have Tony Lou with Partner Energy come back and talk about bluing.
There we go.
Yeah, we want you back to talk about bluing, Jenny. Okay, so put that on your calendar.
Deal.
Hey, Rad, we're down to our last couple of minutes. So, any burning desires or questions you want to ask
Well,
right now?
yeah, I do. I actually wanted to ask. This is just kind of more of a general kind of state of being out there in the state of California. We know it's a market that's always going to be hot. You know, it's a destination draw. It's 6th largest economy. I'm just curious personally because you guys, I think, get those calls. Has there been a shift, Jenny, in what people are looking for in terms of properties? Are you seeing more focus on maybe, smaller boutique, existing established destinations where people are looking for properties that maybe can be converted, added onto. I'm just curious, or is it more new construction? I mean, I heard today that the project for the redoing of the Dana Point Harbor had been just been kind of a consortium has been selected by the city of Dana Point, including our friends from R.D. Olson, by the way, Greg.
Great.
That are that this has been in the works for over 12 years or 20 years, and this is now finally moving forward. There's a new boutique hotel that is planned for overlooking the harbor from the headlands. So it's interesting. It seems to me like we're still doing hospitality projects, but the nature of where people are going is becoming a little bit more specialized and boutique. And I'm just curious, Jenny, from your perspective, if you're seeing any trend changes that way.
Yeah, definitely. So, like I said earlier in the conversation, I think, everything's still being refinanced. So
Right.
that's still happening, right?
Yeah.
But that's not,
Yeah.
that's just repositioning or pulling money out. With respect to construction, so we have a very robust construction side of our business as well. So we do like the document cost review, the budget reviews, the monthly inspections, a lot of times for lenders, but also third-party equity partners as well.
There you go.
So from that perspective, I see, like you said, very small niche markets. I'm still looking at new projects, but in that degree, although our construction group is very, very busy with current construction projects, new ones, I feel like has dropped off a little bit.
Softened a little bit.
Yep.
Well, is that because we might be, say,
The end of the cycle?
bottom of the eighth?
Yeah.
You know?
It's always
Mid-seventh?
let me get my crystal ball.
Yeah. Mine's got a crack in it, so it's in the shop getting fixed. So I've got no clue on that. So, but yeah, I think.
Yeah, but that has served you well. Again.
The crack or the crystal ball?
No, the crack.
Oh, okay.
The crystal ball. Yeah. But I think it is especially I think in California, right? I mean, I hate to once again kind of rah-rah California, but the show is called CheckOut California. So I think we really sometimes end up being very innovative and kind of trailblazing in some of the stuff. And they all look at us and go, you're the left coast cookies over there. But it is fascinating what comes out of this sort of construction industry that is sort of environmentally sensitive, that is sort of better placemaking, if you will. And I'm really excited actually to see what's coming next.
Absolutely, I think that's one of the nice things about living in California and doing business here. There's a lot of things that are borderline or could be a little harder to do here, or quite a bit harder. But our standards help set most of the EPA and as the nation goes. Now, granted, our EPA is under attack, and I won't go under that. And Paul, we're going to run long.
Oh no! Don't get him started on the EPA and all these other things.
But
cut him off, Paul. Cut him off. Cut his mic.
It really is. We do create a building, an environment. We protect an environment. We create that wow factor that a lot of other states don't create. And I think it's because of, we are a melting pot. We've got, from the alt-right to the extreme left and everything in between. And I think that's part of the reason why diversity in this state, and this is one of the reasons why you and I created this show, Rad, was to celebrate those diversities, to celebrate travel and income and hotels and everything else that comes into California.
It's fascinating, Greg. I mean, we did set it up for that, and there's so many layers to this that are not, and we're just looking at one state, right?
Right.
There's so many layers. Even when we've touched on this with some previous guests, that even depending on where you are in the state of California, the dynamics are different.
Oh, they change dramatically. Huge difference, Santa Monica and Palm Springs. Hey, and on that note, Paul's threatening to cut us off. He's got to go. Jenny, thank you so much for being on CheckOut California today.
It's a pleasure.
Rad, you were missed. We need to have Jenny back and have all three of us in the room at the same time. It's been a great conversation.
You know what? I would love to do that. Jenny, again, thank you so much for being there. Sorry I missed being there with you in person, but Great show, guys. I
have a drink for me in Vegas.
I will do that, and I will send you guys a picture. But
actually, you
really
can go to
this is
YouTube
important.
and see Rad Gantos Television from Vegas.
Live from the
You know
nickel
what?
slots.
No. You know, I have a group of people here. We have a standing arrangement. When we show up in Vegas, there's a box with a lock on it. We put our cell phones in there, and we lock the box. And we only get it back as we are leaving town. So,
Yeah, but it's all those security cameras. They gotcha.
Well, then you call your friends and you get some live feed. But listen, thank you again, Jenny. Thanks, guys. Great show. I appreciate you accommodating me being here. I really enjoyed being with you guys over the internet. But I would love to have you back, Jenny. Would love to have you back as a guest.
And let's quickly plug the CLIC conference here.
California Lodging Investment Conference, and Jenny will be there. She is going to possibly be doing double duty, moderating a panel and participating on one. Partner Engineering and Science has been one of our founding sponsors, and Jenny has been a tremendous friend and one of the best people in the industry to help you deal junkies, to get your deals closed on time. So you need to contact her. And please go to CLIconference.com. Registration is open. We've got a special discount for our CheckOut California listeners of CheckOut CA, and that'll give you an additional 20% discount. Again, it's CheckOut CA, and it's the California Lodging Investment Conference. CLIconference.com. You can register, see the agenda, and we will see you there in March.
And Jenny, how do we reach you?
Oh, let's see. Email is best. Jenny@partneresi for Engineering Science Incorporated.com.
And did we do a shout out to Park West here yet?
We did, but let's do another one. Park West General Contractor, specializing in commercial real estate and hospitality practices throughout the Western U.S. Make sure you call Big Ed La Civita and Chris Hostert. Okay. Thanks, everybody. Uh-oh, we cut off Rad.
Welcome, everybody. It's time for a special edition here, a special show, which we call OC Spotlight, where we take a look at some of the topics in the news today and some of the people making news as well. We try and find the most amazing people doing the most incredible things right here in our own backyard, right here in Orange County. And today, we're going to take it a little broader than we usually do. Normally, we're just focused on Orange County discussions, but we have a special guest coming through town, and I wanted to take the opportunity to meet him and to pick his brain on all of our behalf, because as you'll hear in a moment, he's here to talk about a topic that is splashed all over the news these days. So welcome, if you would, Kareem Balchi. Did I say that even close to correct here?
No, it's quite good.
Kareem is, or Karim, as I think he says, is an expert in Middle East politics, a columnist from Today's Zaman. Is that how you pronounce it? And
yes,
that
indeed.
Today's Zaman is what, a newspaper?
It's a daily newspaper in Turkey published in English.
And you're also the chief of the Turkish Review, which I take is a foreign policy publication?
It's a foreign policy publication, a bi-monthly.
Okay. So it's sort of like Foreign Policy or Foreign Affairs or one of those publications
Yes.
here. All right. Well, what in the world brings you to our spot of the world? What brings you all the way across continents here to Orange County?
Let me tell first what brings me out of Turkey.
Right.
I am blacklisted by the Turkish government.
Oh, wow. Is that why there are helicopters flying around outside looking for you here?
I hope not. Well, the Turkish government is unfortunately a consolidating power in the hands of one man, the president of the country, Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan.
Right.
And they don't like the opposition media, and I happen to be one of the opposition journalists in the country. So they took me out of the country. It's a self-imposed exile to prevent any possible arrest.
So you're not going back then to Turkey in the foreseeable future here?
Well, when the president goes out of the country, I will turn back to the country.
Okay. Well, all right. So, and specifically, you're here at the invitation of the Pacifica Institute. Give us a quick overview of what the Pacifica Institute. I looked it up in the internet, and I confess I had never heard of it before, and shame on me because it's quite a large organization with a lot of branches, one of which happens to be here in Orange County. What do they do?
In fact, Pacifica Institute operates in the West Coast cities of the United States. It's an organization basically of the Turkish diaspora living in the United States, trying to help the Turkish community to better integrate into the greater American society and help the American society to understand the dynamics of Middle Eastern politics and culture.
And is there a large Turkish diaspora, as we say, is a group of people who would probably prefer to live in their home country, but for various reasons have left and have formed communities elsewhere? Is there a large Turkish community here in America, and specifically Orange County?
Well, in fact, quantitatively speaking, the numbers are not huge, but qualitatively speaking, I can assuredly say the Western Coast is a beautiful place for Turkish engineers, working in Silicon Valley and similar engineering compounds, and universities in the West Coast do host many Turkish academics, mainly on Turkey, Islam, Middle East, Central Asia, and so on. They are able to set the tone of the discussion in this part of the world.
If there is a Turkish center in Orange or in America here today, where do most Turks live? For example, here in Orange County, we have the largest population of Vietnamese diaspora expatriates. Mm-hmm. We also have obviously large Hispanic populations, and on the edge of Orange County, a very large Indian community. We have a large Persian community here, a large Chinese community, ever-growing Chinese community. Where, if I were going to find the majority of Turk expatriates, where would I find them? What state or what area?
It is actually in New Jersey. The famous Patterson neighborhood is known to be the Little Turkey in the United States.
I've been to Patterson, New Jersey. Yeah.
And in fact, there is already a Turkish cultural center in Patterson.
And is there a Turkish consul here on the West Coast or anything, or is that only on the East Coast, like New York or something?
No, there is a consul general in L.A. Apart from that, I don't know the details if there is any other, but the Turkish Airlines is already flying directly from Istanbul to LA, so this is certainly a new destination for Turkish businessmen.
Now I'm going to tell you what little I know of Turkey here in my own background. I've always been fascinated with foreign affairs, studied it in college 100 million years ago at the University of Michigan, wrote my senior honors thesis on the Nixon-Kissinger foreign policy and its impact on the Cold War. So I've had a fascination with foreign affairs, probably more than most Americans have for most of my life here. And what I've heard about Turkey is this. It seems to be at a crossroads, not just a crossroads geographically between Europe and the Middle East, which has always been its place there. Go look it up on the map. It's right in between these two areas. It's right at the, the Bosporus Straits that allows you from the Mediterranean into the Black Sea there. It's where Constantinople and the Eastern Roman Empire was and all that for generations. So it's played a very critical point geographically, been a bridge between these two cultures and these two areas. But it seems like even more so, it's at a historical crossroads, which is to say, is it an Islamic state or is it an European state? It seems to have one foot in both worlds.
In fact, that discussion is not only about Turkey. Turkey has been going and coming in between, secular democratic country, a member of the European Union, and turning back to its Middle Eastern roots. The discussion back in Turkey is about whether Turkey can serve, as it traditionally did, as a kind of bridge maker between the East and West,
right,
between Islam and Judeo-Christian traditions, Muslims, or it will be a part of either one of those.
Right.
Unfortunately, under the current Justice and Development Party, Turkey moved away from its Western orientation, usually by the foreign policy experts, a shift of axis from the West towards the East. This shift of axis does not only mean a shift towards the Middle East, but it means also a shift towards the Iranian, Chinese, and Russian axis. Turkey has been a member of the NATO alliance from 1956 onwards. So the years that you studied in Michigan University, the Cold War, is actually coming back.
It seems like it. And let's give a little history. I had to look some of this up myself and remind myself here. Obviously, Turkey, for a long period of its history, was the Ottoman Empire. And that as that Ottoman Empire fell apart, there was a unique secular turn. And was that Ataturk?
Yes, it was the founder of the Republic, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk.
And they really, as I understood it, the idea was we're going to become more of a secular society and less of a religious state.
It is indeed, but one thing has to be underlined. The Ottoman Empire was not a religious state also. Ottoman Empire was not at all an Islamic empire. Muslims were always in minority in Ottoman Empire. Ottoman Empire was largely the inheritor of the Byzantium Empire, and it was largely a Christian empire. The ruling family, the family of Osman, which the empire took its name, was a Muslim Turkish family. That was all what Muslim was about the Ottomans.
And didn't they, at different times, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but didn't they at different times profess to be the caliphate, the head of the Islamic State, the Islamic world? Right.
For about 3.5 centuries, the Ottoman sultans were also the caliphs of the Muslim world. But in their own understanding, even the caliphate didn't mean a religious office. It was rather a secular political office. But of course, Ottomans had a special millet system where every different religious group professed their own religion. So the Jews, for example, were running their civic law according to the Jewish religion, and the Christians according to the Christian religion. It was a kind of parallel law that was running on. It was not necessarily only Islamic, it was Islamic, Jewish, and Christian at the same time.
Okay.
This is called the millet system. But by the turn of the 20th century, of course, a secular republic was established. There had been difficult times by means of adaptation into a secular environment. But rather than becoming a secular, it was more difficult to become a nation, because to forge a nation state out of an empire is always painful.
Yes, as the Russians learned, and we'll talk about some more here, there seem to be parallels between what the Russian Empire, later known as the Soviet Empire, as it devolved and shed territory, it's had trouble maintaining relations with those former parts of its empire here.
Yes, certainly. What the Russians are passing through in Russia now, by means of Russification of all other nations who are actually living under Russia, we passed through that in the first half of the 20th century by means of Turkification of the Kurds, or elimination of the Armenians, and, sending Greek Orthodox to Greece and taking Turks from Greece into Turkey, the swapping of populations and so on. These are all painful lessons in our history.
So, we hear quite often that the Islamic world has not formed secular states. Instead, they've either formed strongmen, the kind of people that have run Egypt, or they've sometimes founded kingdoms and stuff, but it's usually been more of an Islamic state and less of a secular democracy. Turkey seemed to fly in the face of that. First of all, is Turkey an Islamic state?
No, Turkey is still largely a secular state, but unfortunately not as democratic as it was 5 years ago.
Right.
We have been passing through I think, historical accident by means of our improvement of the Turkish democracy. I hope we will turn back to the origins, but by and large, Turkish experiment with a largely Muslim population, religiously observant society, and a secular and democratic system had been labeled as a role model for many Muslim countries.
Yes,
in fact,
exactly.
President Obama several times in between 2010 and 2013, these are the years of the so-called Arab Spring, mentioned Turkey as a model state for the Muslim nations of the Middle East. But unfortunately, Turkey has lost its role as a model country, not because we are no longer secular, but because we are no longer really democrat, by means of suppression of the opposition groups and opposition media, of course. And what I observe is actually the Turkish regime is going closer to a kind of Egyptian regime under Hosni Mubarak or Iraqi regime under Saddam Hussein. Both of these people were secular people, but they consolidated power in one hand. They went through a kind of unification of powers, meaning executive, legislative, and judicial organs were all controlled by the same man. And unfortunately, it seems the situation in Turkey is the same.
And that description could also seem to apply to Vladimir Putin, who ostensibly is the head of a democratic secular society, but seems to have coalesced power as a strong man and seems to pull all the strings, whether legally or illegally, and seems to control the country in a way that, like you said, Mubarak did in Egypt, or before him Nasser did, and others throughout the Middle East. What is it about this strong man? We don't quite get that strongman image, although I fear we're starting to get it when I listen to the rhetoric of Donald Trump and people like that who huff and puff and say, that's all I'm going to do is I'm going to blow everything down here.
Well, in fact, I have been in the United States for the last 1 month. I hope that these are all electoral era rhetorics and they are not going to last long, particularly if and ever Trump is elected as the president of the country. I'm sure he's going to turn back to his norms of the United States. One major, I think, clever move by the United States was to limit the number of eligible terms to 2 by means of the president. In the first 2 terms that the Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan was ruling the country, in fact, he was a Democrat. And Turkey did a lot, and this government, we owe to this government many reforms by means of improvement of the democratic standards of the country, improvement of the minority rights, improvement of freedom of expression in the country. But on the 3rd term, he made a U-turn, and he became what we call in the Middle East nowadays a democrator. A democrator.
A democrator. Okay.
Yes, a democrator.
A democratic dictator.
It's a democratic dictator. Democratic in the sense that they managed to be elected. They come out of ballot box.
Right. They didn't come out of the military and just a coup.
No, they don't come out of
like Saddam Hussein or others.
He's elected. He does have the majority of the public support still. I don't see any other name in Turkey that can run and win against him in any election, but this doesn't guarantee a democratic rule, because it comes like a Democrat, he rules like a dictator.
So, why, again, is this such an appealing model in the Middle East and up through the Balkans into Serbian nations? Why is this? People have always said Russia seems to default to, in its entire history, strong men. Are they the only people that can hold these ethnic diverse groups together? Certainly Tito in Yugoslavia held that together for a while until it all fell apart. Saddam held this, I'll say, fake country called Iraq that was created after World War I together. And now, without that strongman, they seem to fall apart. So is it necessary to have a strongman in these areas, or is it simply an appealing proposition to a lot of people in those parts of the world, or is it just lack of historical tradition with democracy like we've developed here? Lots of choices, though.
I think you should add an all choice.
All of the above. Okay.
Yeah, all of the above. Well, the point is this. In my country, I can see a certain level of search for a strong leader among the public. The Turkish people love a strong leader.
Right.
It's a kind of yearning for an Ottoman Sultan.
Yes.
In fact, many supporters of the President Erdogan do receive him during the rallies and so on, with placards opening "The Last Sultan, welcome to our city," and so on.
Didn't he build? Am I wrong? Didn't he build some giant palace or something?
Well, in fact, the palace it's a 1,100 room palace. And
1,000 room palace. Okay.
Yes. And it is named Aksaray in Turkish, which means White House. So it connotes what kind of dream the Turkish president has. He wants to replace Obama.
There you go. So there is an appeal for strong people in that part of the world.
There is an appeal.
And historical precedents. We'll go back to the Ottoman Empire and whatnot here.
Certainly. And the names like Putin is not helping at all, because when people look for strong leaders, they say, look, look to the Russians. It was almost disintegrating, and this Putin came. You know, you remember Gorbachev as a not so strong leader, a bit democratic, and what happened to Russia? It was almost, you know, a failed state.
Right.
And Putin came and turned Russia to its old might, and Russia once again became an international power.
Putin stripped off his shirt and bare-chested rode through the streets on his horse and rallied the people, and all these images he has of himself.
One major difference between Turkey and countries like Russia or, say, Egypt or, say, Iraq is all of these countries which did or do have one-man shows are oil-rich countries.
Yes.
Whereas Turkey doesn't have oil. So for that very basic reason, this is an unsustainable system. You cannot rule a country like Turkey, which continuously needs, you know, economic activism and needs is altogether dependent on trade with the neighboring countries. You cannot just become a democrator in your country and continue on doing well economically.
I love that term, democrator. I'll have to use that term here. So, all right, so why do you think, I know you say it differently, is it Erdogan?
Erdogan.
Yes. So why did Erdogan change? He ended a third term, which you say was one too many, and all of a sudden took a turn. Why? What was it that made him turn, and why did people follow that turn?
Well, the point is, first, Erdogan is not content with being the leader of Turkey. He was already the leader of Turkey. He had all the power he wanted. In fact, he cannot have more power because he has all of it. Turning into a democrator doesn't give him anything else, but he is looking for the leadership of the Muslim world, if not the whole world.
Right. And so he himself is of the Islamic faith. He's a Muslim?
He's a I would say, good Muslim by means of, you know, daily performance of religious duties and so on.
Okay.
He knows the religious rhetoric of Islam. He knows how to speak to the Arabs, for example. I joined once to a state trip with him to Egypt in Cairo University. He spoke to the fans, supporters of Muslim Brotherhood, and I could see the joy in the eyes of the Muslim Brotherhood people that at last they found a Turkish leader who can pronounce Arabic words properly and knows by heart some verses from the Quran and so on. And in fact, he is good by means of reciting the Quran. He has a beautiful voice.
He puts on a good show. Okay.
Yes, indeed.
All right, and a bit more of history here that I learned way back when in the 70s when I was at the University of Michigan. I had the privilege to study under some pretty brilliant people back then. And I took a course in Middle Eastern politics, just trying to understand what then was just the Arab-Israeli conflict, which now seems to have morphed into this clash between cultures again. We're back to the Crusades. It's Christianity versus Islam, at least in some people's view. So one of the things that I had to discover, I'll never forget this, professor said part of the problem in the Middle East, I don't know if you'll agree with this or not, but part of the problem in the Middle East from his perspective was that there were at least 3 or 4 different states that at one time or another in history had ruled the whole area. At one time, this was the Persian Empire, which we now think of as Iran. The Persians had ruled the area. So they think somehow they're entitled to run this whole area. Prior to that or before that, you had the Assyrian Empire. And so Greater Syria sees its role as we really should be the dominant force here. And, of course, the Babylonians, which are now in the area of Iraq, they rule. So each of these areas have a tendency to look to the past and say, you know, this is our rightful place to rule this area. And, of course, the last great group to do this was the Turks in the Ottoman Empire. So you have these, and you have these 3 kind of cultures. Turkish culture, which, as I understand, goes beyond Turkey. We'll talk about that in a minute. The Turkmen and the Turkmenistan and all these other areas where they show influence in their Turkish languages. And then you have the Persian language and the Iranian people, and then you have this greater conglomerate of Arab peoples that at one time were ruled by all these other people and now themselves somehow want to take control. This Islamic state that wants to arise and claim its position as the caliphate, the speaker of the Islamic world and the ruler of that whole area. So his point was, how do you get all of these groups together when there are at least 3 or 4 other players, the Turks, the Iranians, the Arabs, who all see themselves as the rightful ruler of this region.
The observation is right. Many nations in the Middle East do believe that they are the inheritors of a mighty empire in the past, and they deserve to rule. And in fact, I think this is good. This is good that we cannot unite on establishing a caliphate, because any kind of unification on the lines of political Islamism in the embodiment of a caliphate will actually reignite the Crusaders exactly at that time. Then we will come to terms with Samuel Huntington, who foresaw a clash of civilizations. It's good that the Muslim world cannot unite on political means, but we could have united on peaceful projects, certainly. But caliphate is not a peaceful project at all.
No, it doesn't seem to be. So you've got these, and I think that's part of what Americans don't understand. This is just my own observation, why ISIS is so successful in recruiting people to it, why all of these strong men are successful in recruiting people to their causes, is there's almost a, maybe this is a harsh word, but almost a humiliation of a feeling of, like in Russia, we lost something. We had something great, and we feel somehow we have lost something. And so anybody who claims to reclaim that glory instantly wins support. Putin is going to somehow regain the lost glory of the Russian people here. Erdogan's maybe going to reclaim the lost glory of the Turkish people here. ISIS is going to reclaim the lost caliphate from the 1500s or 1100s or whenever the last one existed. Somehow there's this tremendous appeal to restoring honor that I don't know that Americans quite get.
This is called post-imperial trauma. And,
right, yeah.
And it's not only unique to the Middle East. Look at France. Look at the appeal that Le Pen does have on the French people. This is
Marine Le Pen,
right. And also look at Hungary, for example. Austro-Hungarian Empire was one of the most stronger empires in the region, and we are seeing a recoming of Hungarian democratorship once again, not a dictatorship.
So are we perhaps in this country susceptible to that same disease? Are we trying to reclaim the lost century of American greatness here, as people accuse Obama and others, where many people say America's losing its greatness and we have to fight to hold on to that, as if that's somehow our rightful position in the world here?
I will tell something to you. I'm not sure whether this observation affirms what you are saying, but it is an alarming wake-up call. In the Muslim world, most of the Muslim minds are living in a kind of anachronistic situation, meaning the history never ends in the Muslim mind. The Crusades for a Western mind is over. It's something of history. But
worse than over, people don't even know it existed in this country here. There was a Crusades. When was that?
Whereas in the Muslim Middle East, it is not over. We lived through the Crusades.
Right.
The age of colonies, the colonization of Muslim lands by Britain, by France mainly, is not over. For France it is over. For Britain it's over. But for Muslim mind, we are still colonized. And the Israeli occupation of Palestinian lands is not only in Palestine. It is all over the Muslim world. Mentally, Muslims all over the Muslim world are occupied. And I use this term both metaphorically, meaning preoccupied, but also we feel that we are under occupation.
So we're dealing with feelings and perception, I guess. Feelings
and perception, and what this has created is this: the intellectual capacity, the intellectual capital of the Muslim world is poured into discussions on anti-Westernism, discussions on colonization.
Great glory.
Yes, indeed.
Right.
But when I came to the United States, it was, of course, as I said initially, this is an electoral era. It's understandable that people like Donald Trump is trying to build a kind of identity for his power base and so on. But I can see that the American intellectuals are preoccupied with ISIS, whereas ISIS didn't occupy the United States of America. But mentally, the Americans are occupied with the problem.
Amen. We had, and it was horrible, right near us here in San Bernardino, two people who I guess became followers of this through whatever reason. They became followers of ISIS and swore adherence, and of course they shot up the place. And 14 people died.
Yeah.
And now, because 14 people died, we're going to spend $14 trillion trying to fight this menace as if it is marching up and down our streets and we're all immediately threatened by it. horrible that 14 people died, but we've so blown this, in my opinion, into such an overwhelming fear. Everybody's afraid to go out now as if it's going to happen anywhere and everywhere.
And in fact...
Which is what the terrorism is supposed to do. It's supposed to create terror.
Yeah. In fact, the discussion is not a healthy discussion. It's, of course, the United States of America is a global power. It has duties all over the world. It's not only when ISIS hits the United States of America that the Americans need to be concerned. Right. When it was back in Syria, United States had to be concerned also. I do understand that, but the discussion is not about solution. Discussion is not about the root causes of terrorism.
Right.
Whether Americans should buy guns or not carry guns has nothing to do with the root causes of the terrorism.
Right, exactly.
Okay, or whether we should stop Muslims entering in the United States or not entering in the United States, it has nothing to do with terrorism. In fact, if we block Muslims from entering into the United States, we will certainly lose the moderate Muslims, and we will certainly lose our, collaborators against terrorism.
Amen. We drive everybody into their arms here. Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to take a quick break here and come back and talk about the roots of terrorism from your perspective, and then we'll talk about what is in the topical news these days, Russia and Turkey. And is that a flashpoint that's going to explode, or is that just a reflaring of old animosities and old empires rubbing up against each other? We're going to look at all that and more as we come back right here in OC Spotlight, right here in Orange County's only community radio station, octalkradio.net.
Wow. Marketing predictions are out for 2015, and marketing success is changing. Did you know that Google is now actively tracking your business and personal brand and online reputation? Online and offline marketing has changed. Google is driving more than 85% of your traffic. And if your brand is inconsistent or has poor mobile usability, your rankings and traffic can suffer in 2015. To learn how your business is currently viewed and what can be done to improve your brand's visibility and authority, contact SunUp Group for a free marketing analysis. It could be a business game changer. Visit www.sunupgroup.com today or call 877-609-3840, extension 700.
I'm on the observation deck of the Empire State Building to demonstrate how much material Waste Management recycles. As North America's largest residential recycler, last year alone, Waste Management recycled 12.9 million tons. How much is that? Let's do the math. Carry the 6. It's enough to fill this building more than 27 times. With experience like that, we're bound to have a program that can help your business recycle. Talk to Waste Management or visit thinkgreen.com.
All right, today we're thinking Turkey.com here. We're thinking about, and we're privileged to have with us, see if I can get his name. Pronounce your name again here so I don't butcher it.
Kerim Balcı.
And somebody who, by his own description, is an opposition voice in a country that seems to be silencing opposition. Let's talk about the atmosphere in Turkey right now, because as I was scrolling through the Internet in preparation for this interview, I found a fascinating piece by the Brookings Institute, and they said Putin and Erdogan, two halves of the same coin. They're both populists, they're both nationalists, they're both whipping people up, and they're both consolidating power and becoming, as you said, dictators in a democratic society here. Let's talk about that. Is that part of the conflict between these two guys? Two tough guys trying to each fight for their space in the world here?
Yeah, yes, in fact, and they are taking it personal. When the Russian jet was...
Putin says, I've been stabbed in the back.
Yes, right? Exactly.
He's been stabbed, right?
Yeah, he has been stabbed. He takes it personal, and Erdogan in turn says, Putin knows me very well. He knows how we will respond. It's not about people knowing you as the president very well. This is the Turkish Republic that is going to respond. In fact, Turkey is a member of NATO alliance. It's going to be a unified response of NATO. It's not about you as the leader, but he takes it personal. In fact, when we criticize his manners as the head of the executive, he takes it also as personal. He always says, "Don't mingle my family. Don't speak about my son," and so on. It's all about him. In
the same way that Putin seems to have that same thing. Yes. Any personal criticism against him gets shut down very quickly here. So both countries seems on paper they allow for free press and for democratic opposition parties. But in fact, these groups get shot with water cannons and run off the streets and whatnot. Is it better or worse in Turkey right now than it is in in Russia, the former Soviet Union, or is it the same?
Well, the point is Putin has already crashed the opposition, so nobody is actually now...
Nobody's dying in the streets because they've already died.
Yeah, they have already died. They're not going out of the street. But when it comes to Turkey, particularly the Kurdish population is still trying to continue
We'll get
the
into
fight.
the Kurds in a moment here. That's a whole other subject of discussion. But so there is... They are crushing it. Wasn't there, now I don't really know enough about this, but wasn't there something about some old barracks that wanted to get turned into something, and it turned into a protest? What was that all about?
Yeah, it was the Gezi Park event back in 2013 when the government wanted to rebuild some old Ottoman-era barracks, which is actually a park now. The symbol of Turkish secularism, Taksim Square, and the government wanted to turn the Taksim Square into a shopping mall. Not to a mosque. You know, many people think that this government is an Islamist government and trying to bring Sharia to Turkey. It's not true. They are trying to bring a kind of mafia rule which prioritizes neoliberal policies, wild capitalism, and so on. So any shopping mall is much welcomed for the government than a mosque.
Even if it's in the People's Peace Park here or something or whatever. And that seems to be, you could be describing Russia to me, isn't it? Sort of a mafia kind of rule of an oligarchy group that supposedly it's a democratic society, but it's all corrupt. I mean, I've heard estimates that Putin himself has $40 billion stashed away, a lot of it here in the United States and other places here. In fact, I saw somebody on MSNBC once and said, you really want to get Putin where he lives? Start calling out where all his investments are and where all his money is, and show the people of Russia he's not just doing this for their greater glory, and a lot of it's his own personal good here, too.
Well, it seems that the Turkish president is one of the richest people in the world also, together
really?
with...
Okay.
I'm not sure as rich as President Putin, but certainly quite rich. And, it's not only about one man being rich, but a group of people who are supporting his one-man show is becoming rich and rich. He's creating his own bourgeoisie.
But these are two former enemies, two former adversaries, two neighbors who have fought often. I had to go back and look. The last time Turkey and Russia fought was World War I, where the Turks sided with the Germans in World War I. In World War II, the Turks sat out, but really still kind of weren't too supportive of the Russians. There was a Russian-Turkish war that I did not remember, 1877, and then prior to that, the famous Crimean War, Charge of the Light Brigade, and all that. So they've had 1850, 1870, 1914, and maybe sort of in the 40s, there have been a history of conflict between these two empires, these two neighbors here. Is this just resurfacing? Is this, as one article I read said, history repeating itself?
Well, history repeating, but the dates you have already given are far history. In fact, the history that is repeating itself is a closer history. It's about the Cold War, of 1950s and 1960s, before the détente, that is repeating itself. Once upon a time we had this Cuban missile crisis.
Yes,
now we have ISIS crisis.
Right.
At that time also the Soviet Empire was claiming that they are working for universal peace and so on. Now Russia is claiming that they are hitting the terrorists in Syria, whereas actually they are hitting the allies of the United States and allies of Turkey.
Right, and very specifically, which I didn't realize, very specifically the allies of Turkey, these Turkmen.
Turkmens, yes, Turkmens.
And the Turkmen are a Turkish-speaking people in Syria that, by virtue of the fact that they're related to the Turkish people, there's a sympathy there, there's a connection there, there's a shared common language and culture, and kind of on the border of Turkey. And the other thing I saw, which I thought was very interesting, I hadn't thought about this, but I saw this in an article, is that Turkey, like most empires, wants to have some sort of buffer around it. And just as the Soviet Union took over Eastern Europe, not because they really wanted to run Eastern Europe, but they wanted a buffer. They go back to Napoleon invading, and they want to have this long stretch of buffer states that you got to fight your way through before you get to the motherland. In the same sense, Turkey seems to be trying to establish a buffer zone with this Turkmen group. Is that correct?
It is correct. It's not only a buffer zone that will prevent, expansion of Assad armies into Turkey or ISIS terrorism into Turkey. It will also prevent from Kurds, which are enemies of Turkey, also in Syria, to create their continuous zone of autonomy. If they do manage to do so, the Kurds have 3 different areas of control in Syria. If they unite them, they will certainly look for autonomy and in the long run for independence. And the Turkish establishment is stuck with the idea of Kurdish autonomy in the region, meaning Kurdish autonomy in Turkey also. Turkey has the largest Kurdish population in the world, so it's understandably afraid of any kind of possible Kurdish state,
because they would split off. They'd take territory and form a new country.
Well, there is this feeling that if there is an independent state in Syria or in Iraq, then our Kurds in Turkey will also say, okay, why not us also?
Right.
There is that fear. And the Turkomans are actually preventing that from happening. In fact, ISIS is also preventing that from happening. In that sense, whereas ISIS is number one enemy of the West, of the United States in Syria, ISIS is a useful enemy for Turkey. It's an enemy, yes, but it's a useful enemy. It prevents the Kurds from creating a continuous zone of influence.
And that's why Americans struggle to understand this. We want good guys and bad guys. We want World War II, the Nazis versus the good guys here. And when you go into places like Syria, you've got Alawite Shiites, which are a subsect of Shiites.
Yes.
You've got Sunni and Shiites that split, back in the 1100s or something here, over the succession to Muhammad here. And one group went one way, another one, and since then they've hated each other and fought with each other. And one subsect of the Shiite minority is this Alawite group that lives in the mountains of Syria along the Lebanese border or whatever. And they, for whatever reason, got control of this country called Syria when the French and British divided up the Middle East. How did the Alawites end up in control of Syria?
Well, amazingly, Alawites used to be mountain people, as you said. They're dealing with agriculture, not rich, not in control of the bureaucracy. But one particular man played a great role, Hafiz al-Assad, the father of Bashar al-Assad.
The current...
he managed to become an influential colonel in the air forces, and he managed to convince his own community to move into the army.
And that's what they came to dominate.
Yes, in fact, they first started to control the air forces, and later on the mukhabarat in Arabic, the intelligence services,
the secret police,
the secret police of Syria, and the Syrian secret police is the worst of all.
Is it really?
It is. Among the Arabs, they say when you say secret police of Egypt, it is secret police of Egypt. When you say just secret police, it is secret police of Syria. So it is the secret police par excellence.
The most secrets, right?
Most secret.
So somehow this Alawite group took over, and then, of course, and the rest of the community's view, dominated everything, kept everybody down, including the Sunni majority in the country.
Yes.
So at some point, when the Arab Spring erupted, they said, enough with this guy, and people wanted to throw him off. And as somebody said to me a long time ago, in an article I read also supported this, it's no secret that why he started bombing his own people. This is a fight to the death, because they felt if they lost, that they were going to be next. They were going to be persecuted and killed or whatnot. So this is a fight to the death for this Alawite community.
Certainly, and there are the lessons of Iraq, actually. It is exactly what happened in Iraq. By the American invasion, the previously dictatorial Sunni forces, which were in minority in Iraq, they lost their position of control and domination, and a Shiite governance came to power, and the majority became dictators now, and the Sunnis started to suffer. In fact, this is what gave birth to ISIS in the long run. So think of yourself as an Alawite in Syria, and you are observing what's going on in Iraq. You realize that, well,
if we lose, we're going to
we lose everything. It's not just we will lose the prime ministry,
Right. So you've got this one group fighting for that, and you've got certain Christian communities, aren't there Druze and or the Druze are sort of a mixture of Muslim and Christian. I've never quite understood who the Druze are, but
yes.
But and then you've got other Alawite, you've got other Christians and Marianites and other groups that live in this area, and pockets of Crusaders that have survived through the centuries, and then you have, of course, the Sunni and traditional Sunni and Shiite, all these religious groups fighting each other, and then on top of it, we got this ethnic element. We've got Turkmens in the north, we've got Kurds in the north, and they don't sort of get along, and they're fighting for their own reasons, and all of this mess.
And on top of religious and ethnic sectarian groups, we have to put the tribal dynamics of Syria.
Yes, right. Another thing we struggle with to understand. Yeah. So people, am I first and foremost a member of a tribe? Am I first and foremost a member of a religion, of a region, of a culture, of an ethnic group, of a country? Where is my allegiance first?
That is the issue when you said a fake state of Iraq.
Yeah.
That is not because it was created artificially by the British and the Russian drawing the new map after the Ottomans. It's because it didn't take into consideration the tribal dynamics or sectarian dynamics of those lands.
Why were the Europeans so stupid? I'm sorry to say this after the war, and why didn't the U.S. Through Woodrow Wilson, ever insist more on drawing these lines more intelligently? Africa is still fighting to this day. All these countries, the Balkans have fought forever over these artificial lines that they drew where they split ethnic groups and religions in half. And the Kurds, why weren't the Kurds given a homeland back then?
Yeah, the Kurds are unfortunately in 4 different countries, and they were not given a land. And it is, well, many people back in my country, in fact in my region, believe that this was intentionally and deliberately done in a stupid way so that we will always fight with each other.
I've heard that. Somebody said as long as we divide them up, they'll always be fighting with each other, and then we can just come in and get what we want.
It is the famous divide and rule strategy that is attributed to the British.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Divide these people up, let them fight amongst themselves, and they will never unite, and so we'll always have control over them and get what we want, which is their oil everywhere or the resources here.
That is the kind of perception of the mismanagement of the remapping of the Middle East and of sub-Saharan Africa, unfortunately.
So, and I hope this doesn't offend you, because I know this is a very sensitive subject, but I got to bring up Armenians here. We have a very large Armenian community in Southern California, mostly up around Glendale, but a very large community here as well. And of course, the Armenians to this day feel that they got caught in a genocide that started during World War I. Because I'm not sure why, because they tended to support the Russians or something, and that turned into an outright slaughter, and they drove them down into what was supposed to be Syria, and most of them died on the way there.
Well, if we just...
and the Turkish seem to be reluctant, the Turkish government reluctant to admit this or talk about it or even acknowledge it here.
Well, the point is this. If we just say that the relocation of the Armenians that started during the First World War, it was only because they supported the Russians, we will not do justice to the Armenians. In fact, Armenian pogroms, or the term President Obama cleverly formulated in Armenian, Yadvegen, started far before then. In 1880s, also the Armenians were massacred in Ottoman lands.
And you got to go back and study history. Pogroms are an event that a name they gave to religious persecutions or ethnic persecutions in Russia, in Turkey, and all these areas. The Jews had pogroms against them under the Tsars, where they just came in and slaughtered the villages and whatnot. I'm not sure why these poor people were all selected for this, but for whatever reason, they were targeted and hit pretty hard at different times in history here. So you're saying the Armenians suffered the same pogroms,
certainly.
Right?
Well, the point is this. Already during the Tanzimat era, this is the Reformation era of the Ottoman Empire, back in the second half of the 19th century, the Ottoman intellectuals believed that as long as we have so many sectarian, religious, ethnic, linguistic differences, we cannot create a solidarity. So there was this nation-state project.
Ethnic purity, or whatever
homogeneity. They believe if we have a small but unified nation, it will perform better than an empire, they believe. So there was this Turkification project of the Ottoman elite. This has nothing to do with the Republican elite. They continued on with it, but it was already there during the Ottomans. And in fact, the purificationists usually utilize times of war to get rid of their, others.
Yes, the others.
And the Armenians were the very first, and of course the grievances of Armenians outnumber the grievances of Assyrians, for example, that followed in 1920s, or the Jews that followed in early 1950s, or the Greeks that were, sent to Greece through a swap of population. The numbers are huge, and well, of course, being killed or annihilated, it cannot be compared to being swapped. But when you go to Greece and listen to the stories of Greeks who were born in Istanbul, their yearning of the Bosphorus and so on, then you will realize that we have created lots of pains out there.
And in fact, look at the island of Cyprus, which apparently is maybe close to coming up with some closing a chapter there where the island is divided between the Greeks and the Turks, and it goes back to what you're talking about, this hatred, this fight between those empires, those peoples for history. And
this was done in an era where the United States of America was actually appealing to others. The United States became a nation of immigrants, and whereas
we are a nation of others.
Whereas we were trying to get rid of others.
And we said, give us your huddled masses yearning to be free, as they say in the Statue of Liberty here, which is ironic. I'm going to give my own little soapbox here. Why are we as Americans every so often so afraid of others? I'm Irish Catholic. When they came over in droves in the 1850s because of the potato famine, they're Catholics, they're agents of the Pope, and we need to drive these Catholics out here. And there was the know-nothing parties, and the Ku Klux Klan was formed not just against African Americans, but against Irish as well, and Catholics. And then later on we have famous hatred of other ethnic groups as they come over. And now there is this huge collection of others that the Donald Trumps are vilifying. The Mexicans flooding across the border that are all rapists and drug dealers, the homosexuals, the feminists, the African Americans still. We as a country of collection of others, cast off others, every so often fall into that same fear.
Well, distinguished Professor Bernard Lewis wrote about the American identity back soon after the 9/11 calamity, and he claimed that the United States of America is so heterogeneous that it needs others out there in order to claim a certain kind of unity.
Oh, so the only unity we have is we're not them.
Yes.
There's them and there's us somehow.
This is the traditional, Cartesian understanding of the world. There are only blacks and whites. There are no gray zones in the world, and so on. Despite the fact that the world is all gray.
Right.
None of us are black and white.
No. In fact, I've always understood, why do we describe in this country we can't get over racism here? And when you call one group black and the other group white, that's a pretty big difference. That's about as far apart as you can get here. If we don't just say they're African Americans, they're black and we're white. One's good, one's bad, one's evil, one's right. Extreme polar images there just by the words that you choose here.
Dirty joke in Turkish. I hope nobody...
good. We want to hear a dirty joke in Turkish. Right?
Well, I hope nobody is offended from this, but this is about a certain group of people called Laz in Turkey who are Caucasian people who are always, find clever solutions to problems.
Okay. And what are they called? What's
Laz. Laz.
How would you spell that?
L-A-Z.
Okay.
Laz.
Okay.
So Laz came to United States and he was waiting for a bus, and the bus came, and suddenly white and blacks started to fight to go in first, and he didn't understand what is the problem. And he said, "What is the problem?" And the Afro-American said, these white people, they don't let us in the bus. They want always us to sit on the back and so on. Right. And the whites claimed that the Afro-Americans didn't have the same right, and the Turkish law said, "Why don't you think that you are all blue for some time?" They said, okay, this is a beautiful solution. This is a solution. Okay, he said, let us go in. Of course, this time everybody wanted to go in as blue. And he looked and he said, no, this is not going to work. Let the light blues first and the dark blues later.
Exactly.
So the lesson of the joke says sometimes you may not escape the Cartesian understanding of the world.
The Cartesian understanding.
The Cartesian says, the dichotomous understanding that there is true and false. There are no no zones between true and false, or good and bad. There are no zones
one or the
between
other. Which side are you on here?
Yeah.
As President Bush said, you're for us or against us.
That's exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
All right, so in a couple of minutes we have to wrap up. Give us an understanding of what's in the news right now and what's going to happen. And I'll give you 3 areas to cover here. One, what's going to happen with ISIS in Turkey? Is Turkey going to step in? Are they going to invade? Are they going to send troops and planes? Are they going to be the boots on the ground we're anxious for? 2, what's going to happen to the poor Kurds in all of this? Are they going to keep fighting? Are they going to break off and find their own country here and unite with? They pretty much have broken off in Iraq. They're trying to break off in Syria and all join together. And 3, what's going to happen with the Russians? Is this the flashpoint we've been fearing? Is this going to start World War III?
Well, I think the Turkish President badly wants Turkish army to enter into Syria because he believes the Turkish army and he himself as the justice giver or organizer of the Middle East, that he's going to solve the problems in the Middle East. But the Turkish army does not have that potential. I believe it will be a calamity, a catastrophe for the Turks, and in fact it is going to reignite the traditional enmity between the Turks and the Arabs. Many Turks think that everybody loves them, but the Arabs do not love Turks. And when you ask
again,
the Arabs,
there's 3 ethnic groups: the Turks, the Arabs, and the Persians all seem to be, in one way or another, still fighting with each other for control of this area. Right?
Yes, indeed. But in the end, somebody has to enter into Syria and Iraq and has to make the fight.
We're begging somebody to go, other than us. We don't want to go.
Well, the point is this: even Secretary of State Kerry said it may be even the Syrian army that will do the job.
We may have to go back and make friends with Assad and say, all right, you go do it.
Well, the point is this. In fact, if we could convince Assad to move into a kind of interim period of reforms in Syria, it would be beautiful to push the reset button and turn back to pre-Arab Spring times.
Why can't we split these countries up? When Joe Biden suggested that he was vilified, and yet I heard somebody the other night, I think it was actually Ted Cruz or somebody like that surprised me and said, why don't we split these countries up again here into what are probably more natural states? Why can't the Alawites take part of Syria and be there where they are or else, and then split the country up? Why is this so evil to even talk about redrawing these maps that were artificially drawn 100 years ago?
The point is this: there are no natural limits to dividing groups.
There's not a river or something that separates them.
No, it's not. It's not only about that. Let us say that we are going to divide Syria on religious sectarian lines.
Right.
Okay, Sunni, Shiite, and Christian, and Druze, and so on.
Right.
There are 4 major groups.
Right.
But the point is, some of the tribes are both Sunni and Shiite. Some of the tribes are both Christian and Muslim.
I see. So what criteria do you use to separate people? Is it by tribal allegiance? Is it by religious allegiance? Is it by ethnic allegiance?
And if you
language?
let we decide that, okay, Christians will have their own land, but Christians have Orthodox Arab Christians and Maronite Christians,
who still adhere to the Roman Catholic faith.
Yes, indeed.
Right.
So there are differences also there. So you cannot stop there. Then you will go back to the tribal times where there was no state and anarchy ruled.
Right.
So that is the fear in the region. That is the reason why, for example, when Saddam was ousted in Iraq, there was a consensus between Turkey, Iran, and the United States that the Unitarian structure of Iraq has to be saved.
Well, which seems crazy because it's pretty much broken into 3 parts anyway right now, and the Iranians have basically moved in and taken over the Shiite part, de facto or de jure, whichever way you want to thought, in law or in practice, and the Sunnis are by definition looking for somebody to strong man, so they're fleeing to accepting ISIS. North, the Kurds pretty much call their own show here.
Well, the point is, there are some cities that are undividable. You know, Baghdad does have a Kurdish, and also Kirkuk. This is the center of richness. You know, most rich oil and gas reserves in the world.
And that's kind of up in the north where the Kurds it's on the edge.
It's already controlled by the Kurds, but of course the central government, the Shiites, claim a role, and it used to be a Sunni area, so everybody wants Kirkuk.
So your prediction is the Turks do want to go in, and maybe the Americans will encourage them because we want somebody other than us this time, but you think it would be a disaster if they did so?
It is going to be a disaster. The best possible option is the Kurds doing the job.
That's what everybody seems to turn to. They're tough fighters.
And they are tough fighters. They are willing
to do this. And
the point is this. We Turks do not have anything to lose in Syria if we don't go into, but the Kurds have everything to lose in Syria.
Do the Turks want to arm the Kurds? Aren't they going to come back after they win and turn it on the Turks here? And
that is the basic issue in Syria. Our list of enemies do not overlap with the list of enemies of United States. You know, where Americans think Kurds as allies. We believe them are number one enemies.
Right.
Americans say number one enemy is ISIS. We say yes, it's an enemy, but it's a useful enemy. Americans says we have to get rid of Jabhat al-Nusra. There are all claims that Turkish government is helping Jabhat al-Nusra.
Really?
Yes, and American says
Nusra is what's left of the Al-Qaeda group.
What's left of the Al-Qaeda group. The list is not unified. It's not overlapping, and I'm not speaking about the list of the Russians. It is upside down.
Yeah, right.
And Europe does have a different list. Europe cares about refugee flux. They don't care about what's happening in Syria.
Solve it, because we can't take out 10 million people moving into our nations here.
Yeah. So the priority of Germany is to stop the refugees, you know, not in Syria, not necessarily, but certainly in Turkey.
Right.
So their priority is this. Under such circumstances that NATO allies do not have a unified list of enemies, do not have a unified list of priorities.
Or even they don't even know who to support.
Yeah. But the point is this, good to see that Putin is involved. When Putin is in picture, then suddenly the NATO allies come to terms and say, okay, we have to unite.
Right.
Because this is too large for anybody to tackle.
We only got one common enemy, and
he is Putin. So most probably Turkey will come to terms with the United States by means of training and equipment of Kurdish militia in Syria, and the Kurds are going to do the job.
And did the Turks and the Russians continue to fight, or did they let economic interests? I didn't realize that the Turks are the number one consumer of Russian natural gas, and they want it to flow into that area. The Turks have turned to the Russians to build nuclear power plants in the country. I didn't know all this. So there's a huge economic interest to keep working with the Russians, or do they fall back into this long history that we talked about? Two empires, two different religions, two strong men elbowing each other. What happens?
Well, the point is, you know, the numbers are quite alarming. Turkey is dependent on 66% dependent on Russian oil and gas.
Wow.
And we don't
not from the southern area, not from the Middle East. They get it from Russia. They don't get oil and gas.
We get oil and gas from Russia and China. It's Russia and Iran, basically. No other nations. We have signed a new deal with Qatar to buy liquefied gas, but it is much more expensive, and it is not easy to bring them with tankers. It has to pass through the Suez Channel, which is under the control of Egypt, which does hate Turkish government.
Yes, right. That's a whole other series of discussions.
Well, in fact, today in the morning there was a news item in Israeli press that claimed that Turkey and Israel at last decided to solve their problems, diplomatically, because of the fight in Blue Marmara incident. Turkey does not have an embassy in Israel, and the diplomatic relations are...
Just quickly, what happened is the Israelis tried to stop some flow of arms into Gaza because they said
it was not a flow of arms. It was a humanitarian aid or aid ship.
Right. Yeah. And they claimed there might be guns in there.
Yes, indeed. They took on the boat, and
this boat came from Turkey, and they stopped it.
Yes, they stopped it, and 10 Turkish citizens were killed during the fight on board the ship. This was on the May 13th of 2010. For the last 5 years, we don't have proper diplomatic relations, but Israel has gas.
So maybe we'll forget about that.
Yeah,
You
it's exactly. The sides agreed, and the agreement does have a particular article, telling that Turkey is going to buy natural gas from Israel, and in fact, Israel does need Turkey as a route to reach to the European market.
See, this is what drives us crazy in this country. We tend to think everything in economic terms. Okay, so you guys hate each other, but you need this, I need this. How much do you want to stop hating each other? $100 million, and you guys shake hands. $200 million is to bury these 5th-century divisions, and tend to think economics trumps everything, but not necessarily.
In the case of Turkey and Israel, it was even much more smaller, $20 million.
That was one of the figure.
That was the figure. Israel accepted to pay $20 million in compensation for the lost lives and apologized. Israel already apologized.
Right.
It was something brokered by President Obama, but Israel wasn't able to agree by means of compensation, and they agreed now.
I've already exceeded the time we normally do, but I ask you one question here, and then please be honest. We, in the middle of this debate right now, so many people say on the Republican side that Obama's been weak and has weakened the U.S. position, and our allies don't like us, and we're weaker in the world. Is that your opinion? Or because he certainly did try efforts to mend relations with the Islamic world. The famous speech where he almost seemed to be apologetic to Muslims for some of the stuff we'd done when he went to Egypt. The efforts, as you're saying, to broker agreements between Israel and Turkey and stuff. Is there more to the story, or does that how the Turks see? How do the Turks see? And how do you see him, and how do the Turks see Obama?
Well, the
What's his legacy?
The point is this: the Turks love conspiracies, and a lot of Turks believe that President Obama is actually a Muslim.
Really? Just like my late great father did. He's really a Muslim agent who's been raised to infiltrate America here. Yeah.
And
really?
in fact, Turkey has one of the highest anti-Americanism sentiments, but President Obama is still likened in Turkey. So we have this absurdity in international public surveys that the Turkish people hate the United States of America, but they love the President of the United States of America.
Oh, great.
That still is the case.
Okay. All right. Any final thoughts, predictions of what will happen here? Anything we should watch for? This is being recorded in December at the end of 2015, so if you're listening to it in a podcast next year, in 5 years or 2 years, give us a prediction and people can judge you by this here. They'll be able to say, oh, he knew what he was talking about, or no, boy, that guy was wrong. Give us some prediction here.
Well, I think with the involvement of Russia in Ukraine and the NATO-Russia conflict will cease to exist. It will continue, and with every stage it will become even stronger and stronger. So I think these are the initial days of the second Cold War that we are passing through. The United States.
So not a hot war, but a Cold War.
It's not a hot war. And in fact, with the experience of the first Cold War, I don't think that the sides will be so stupid to go into a hot war. But certainly the Russian involvement will actually turn other problems like ISIS, other problems like dictatorships in the Middle East into secondary or trivial issues. This is not a good news for me, for example, because under such conditions, I think the Western alliance will not be willing to speak about the breachings of democratic rights in Turkey or crackdown on media in Turkey. Each time we will try to appeal to the Americans, they will say, we are dealing with Russia.
We got bigger problems.
We got bigger problems.
Right.
And as long as we got that bigger problem, we will fail to address the root causes of Islamist terrorism also, and we won't be able to get rid of that problem, despite the fact that we have all the means to fight that fight, not militarily, but certainly on discursive basis. We may fail to do so, and we may use all our intellectual capacity to fight a fight in the Cold War between Russia, China, Iran, and the Western Alliance.
Wow. A lot to think about. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. Do you ever plan to come back to this area again? Because we'd love to continue the conversation. I still like to find out what Turkey is like as a country. Is it open to import-export? Can you do business there? All these kind of questions that I'd love to find out someday, but we're out of time here.
Well, certainly Turkey is going to be a destination for businessmen, particularly if there's going to be a crisis. But these are going to be not the businessmen for investment, but for loan restructuring. So finance industry. But many Turkish businessmen are looking for opportunities to move to the western coast, and we may see more and more Turkish businessmen moving out of Turkey with fear of persecution in Turkey because of their political views and so on.
Same thing we're seeing with the Chinese. We talked about a number of shows. I'm not trying to be alarmist, but there's quite a number of Chinese moving here, parking money here. EB5 program where they're bringing over $1 million or more, the millionaire visa, and you set up a property, and then you get a visa over here. Many people feel that they're doing that as a get-out-of-jail-free card, as an escape vehicle if things blow up in China. So we've talked about it. There are whole developments here in Irvine that are being sold out to Chinese. They're coming in with cash. They're parking their families here. They're parking their relatives here. They're buying businesses here, parking money here, just in case things get out of control in China here someday.
Well, things have already got out of control in Turkey, so I will be traveling around the United States.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming by again. And how do they reach the Pacifica Institute? Give us the website and everything if they want to know, because you're not giving a talk here right now. You're just passing through, but they do have events coming up throughout the year talking about Turkish events. I think it's pacificainstitute.org. Yeah. pacificainstitute.org if you want to hear more about the relations in the world with Turkey and what's happening right here in our own backyard. And you have a branch here, everybody's nodding, here in Orange County. You have branches elsewhere. Let's see, go look up Pacifica. I'm looking Los Angeles, Orange County, Silicon Valley, San Diego, San Francisco, all sorts of places, as well as some other states on the western United States. Thank you guys for coming so much here. And we appreciate you taking some time out to tell us what's happening in Turkey here. I'm still not sure I got it all, but it's a lot to digest here. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, we're back with Charlie Wright for some market insights. Who are you talking with this week, Charlie?
Paul, we're talking with Brian Goligoski, founder and CEO of Stillwater Capital out of beautiful Santa Barbara. And Brian writes a newsletter this week in the market. So, Brian, what do you have for us this week?
Again, we got technology off to the races, and we've got a lot of churn under the overall banner of the indexes.
Brian, I read in the Wall Street Journal and elsewhere all the time, all you need to do is buy a cheap index, and you can outperform all these mutual funds, etc. What do you think of that?
Well, what's been true in the last few years is you can throw a dart at an index, but you can't necessarily throw a dart at any stock, given how much disconnect there is under the surface, the way indexes work, the way 10 to 15 stocks basically drive each one. There's a lot of opportunity under the surface for someone that employs long-short strategies the way I do to take advantage of energy falling out of bed or financials having some headline risk or technology doing well.
And so we've had a good year so far in the market, year to date. Tell us who's been winners and losers, who's happy and who's sad.
Happiest has been technology investors and to a secondary extent to healthcare investors. Who's suffered the most has been energy. And to be honest, since the election, piece of the Trump trade that's held up the best has been aerospace and defense, but financials have round trip, and a lot of other industries that were supposed to feel the tailwind of the new administration have completely round tripped that trade. That's another sub-story that isn't really told that much.
So what do you see moving forward?
So moving forward, we've got pretty rich valuations in the United States, and clearly we've got some tension both amongst investors, amongst policymakers, et cetera. So I would say for the remainder of the year, the best gains have been had, and we're probably going to chop around. I know that's not a technical term, but I wouldn't expect another 8% tacked onto your return if you're invested domestically. You probably have a better opportunity overseas and in emerging markets where valuation is still cheaper.
Hey, everybody, you heard it here first. Brian, thank you very much. And how can people get your newsletter?
You can contact Stillwater Capital by sending an email to contact@stillcap.com, and we'll sign you up and have you on the Friday distribution for This Week in the Markets.
Thank you, Brian, very much for the insight.
Thanks, Charlie.
This is a recording of an interview produced by Orange County Talk Radio. This interview discusses one or more investments that investors and or their advisors may want to consider. However, no information provided should be construed as a recommendation to buy or sell any investment, security, or fund. This recording was made for educational purposes only. The guests for this program have paid for the opportunity to be featured on this show, and both Orange County Talk Radio and the host, Charlie Wright, have been compensated for their participation. Please consult a financial professional or tax advisor prior to investing in this or any other opportunity.
You are listening to the Critical Mass Radio Show, Orange County's business talk show, focused on exploring topics of interest to CEOs who are leading middle market companies. With your host, Richard Franzi.
Good afternoon and welcome to Critical Mass Radio Show. I am your host, Rick Franzi, and boy, do we have a great show lined up for you today. Sheriff Sandra Hutchins is our focus guest. We're going to be spending the hour with her talking about her department. She is the Orange County Sheriff and Coroner. This business talk show airs live on Tuesdays and Wednesdays at 4 p.m. and Thursdays at our special time of 3 p.m. Of course, all of our shows can be heard live exclusively on Orange County's only community radio station, octalkradio.net. If you're listening to this show as a podcast, we encourage you to listen live during our broadcast times. This show is brought to you by our advertisers, Brandman University, Center Club, Commercial Bank of California, Decision Toolbox, MBN Design, Smart Business Magazine, S&H Rubber, Succession Strategies, Tone Software, and UPS Protection. The goal for this show is to help you, our listening audience of CEOs running middle market firms, to improve your decision-making skills. Today we're going to go in a little different direction in that I've invited Sandra in to talk about not only her role in Orange County in the responsibilities that she has, but also one of their programs that caught my attention, which is called The Great Escape, which we're going to get to a little bit later here in the radio show. But first, Sandra, let me say welcome to the program.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here.
It's nice to have you here. Let's start very simply. For those that may not know, can you tell our audience a little bit about your professional experience, kind of your background? What were you doing that led up to being the Sheriff and Coroner of Orange County, California?
Well, I worked right next door in L.A. County for 30 years for the Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department. I actually started out as a secretary in 1976.
Get out of town.
Right, yeah. And so, I didn't grow up wanting to be in law enforcement. It wasn't something that women wanted to do at that time or were invited to do, quite frankly. But
right
around that time, in the mid-'70s, the L.A. Sheriff's Department really wanted to hire more women and get more women in patrol assignments. Very few were in patrol. And so I had a couple detectives say, why don't you apply to be a deputy sheriff? And I thought, well, why not? I'm going to put my name in. I'm going to go through the oral interviews and the written and the physical agility test, see what happens, and here I am. So I went through the academy over in Los Angeles, worked the jails, worked patrol, worked investigations, worked a surveillance team, and then promoted up the ranks.
Wow. So when you first got hired, were you thinking you would spend a long career there, or were you just looking for a job at the time?
No, it was going to be a career.
Okay.
I mean, when you pick, typically when you do pick law enforcement, it's a career.
Okay.
There's very few people. There are some, but very few leave the profession, and very few, quite frankly, leave the department they came on.
So you went in as a secretary because that's how you could get into the department?
No, it was just a fluke. I was just looking for, I was working in a pharmacy as a pharmacist assistant, and a coworker of mine said L.A. County Sheriff, or no, not even L.A. County Sheriff, L.A. County is hiring clerical positions, so I applied to the county, huge county, so I could have got picked up by any department.
Right.
And I happened to get picked up by the sheriff's department. That didn't sound right. I happened to get picked up by the sheriff's department, but no, I got hired by the sheriff's department, and so that began my education on what law enforcement does and what the job is really all about, and it got me intrigued. In fact, I was working at the Linwood station as a secretary, and at the time, one of the deputies was murdered in the street and died. He died at the hands of some gang members, and literally the whole station emptied out. And I think that had a lot to do with me deciding I want to be a part of this. I want to be a part of the people that will run to the aid of someone else. And it just had a huge effect on me. And so shortly after that, I applied.
Yeah. So you were with the L.A. Police Department through some challenging times as well?
LA Sheriff.
LA Sheriff. I'm sorry, LA
Yeah.
Sheriff's Department through some challenging times.
Absolutely. Yeah, every agency has its challenges, and I worked a very busy area, and a lot of activity, a lot of crime.
So you were able to retire from the LA Sheriff's Department?
Yeah, I did.
So what happened that now you're in Orange County Sheriff? Tell me about that.
Well, I was living in Dana Point.
Nice.
My husband was retired for years. I was commuting to LA for about 10 years. And so I thought...
You were commuting to LA for 10 years.
Yes, 10 years.
You're
I
a
can't
special
imagine.
person.
I can't think about that now. I think of every reason not to go to LA now. Anyway, but no, and so I had 30 years, and so I decided I would retire and had no plans to do anything else in law enforcement. I was going to do what everybody thinks they're going to do. I was going to write the great American novel, right?
Can't wait to read it.
Yeah, and so I was retired for about 9 months.
Wow.
Actually, all of the articles were coming out about the Orange County Sheriff's Department, and Sheriff Corona was having the legal issues,
Sure.
and so the Board of Supervisors was going to do a nationwide search for a sheriff, and so my husband said, why don't you throw your name in the hat?
Your husband said this?
Yes. And so I did.
Good man.
I did, yeah. So I think I was disrupting his retirement routine. I'm not sure if that was it or not. But
Sandra, you need to get back to work.
You need to go to work, yeah. Yeah, I need you out of the house.
Wow.
But so I did, and I knew I was a long shot. I thought, other people have run in the county. I did not know any member of the Board of Supervisors. I was not engaged politically in this county. And so I thought, well, what do I have to lose?
Right, what do you have to lose?
And so here I am.
So at first you were appointed to the position, is that correct?
I was appointed in 2008.
Okay.
And finished out the former sheriff's term. And then I ran in 2010. I had 2 opponents, and I won in the primary on that.
Wow. So what's that like to be an elected official? I mean, is this your first elected?
Oh, yes.
So when you were the LA sheriff, you weren't an elected official?
No.
Okay. So
No.
so this is your first instance of being an elected official?
Absolutely. And I think sheriff is a little bit different. It's a nonpartisan position.
Good.
So and it should be.
Yeah, it should be.
It isn't in every state. In some states like Florida, it is a partisan position. And I think that it's a little bit different being an elected and nonpartisan, because what I'm doing is I'm the CEO of the Sheriff's Department. I'm running a Sheriff's Department. But the sheriff is elected, and I think that's a good thing. And I think it's a good thing that the sheriff's position is not affiliated with one party or another, because you're there to respect everybody's rights.
Right.
And I think it could have a chilling effect if you are connected to one party very overtly over another party.
Right, I agree. You should be elected
yeah.
on your merits of what you believe and your pedigree of your background and profession.
Right, and it's all about, with the sheriff and law enforcement, it's all about you follow the law and make sure, that it's applied fairly to everyone.
Right. We're talking with Sandra Hutchins. As you hear, she is the sheriff and coroner for Orange County, California. We're going to take our first commercial break here on Critical Mass Radio Show. We've got a lot more to come back to. Matter of fact, I want to get a little bit deeper into the sheriff's department. Sandra, maybe the size of the force, the number of the jails, just kind of give our audience a sense for the organization that you're the CEO for. So Stay tuned, ladies and gentlemen. We're right back after these words from our commercial sponsors.
Can we talk about your family business? You know, that thing you put your whole life's blood, sweat, and tears into? Well, what happens when you retire or try and pass that business on to your children? At Succession Strategies, we can help you find the answers. We'll guide you through the unsettling process of protecting your family legacy and successfully passing your business on to the next generation, safely and securely, ensuring that it'll both survive and thrive for generations to come. So ask yourself just one question. Can I really afford to wait? Take the first step. Take our complimentary self-assessment at successionstrategies.com or call us at 714-560-9022 to set up a free consultation at your convenience. That's succession-strategies.com.
Today's businesses are embracing voice-over IP telephones and unified communication desktop technologies to more effectively communicate and collaborate with their customers, suppliers, and colleagues. The Reliatel management software from Tone Software Corporation helps organizations of all sizes manage their communications technologies to ensure great voice quality and better levels of service and reliability throughout their business. Through Reliatel, you'll gain higher return on investments from VoIP and unified communications technologies while lowering the associated operational support and maintenance costs. Learn more. Visit www.tonesoft.com or call 800-833-8663 for information on Reliatel by Tone Software, the solution for quality business communications.
I'm speaking with Sadir Chadalabada, Chief Culture Officer for Commercial Bank of California. Sadir, can you share with us the unique culture your bank has?
Absolutely. As a former operating officer and a strategy officer, I believe and we believe culture is at the heart of everything. Culture is not what we say, but what we do. Happy, engaged employees clearly translate into better products, better services, better innovation, and more profitability. And in the process, we build a purposeful organization. So purpose and profitability go hand in hand. Professional achievement and personal fulfillment reinforce each other. That's what we believe in. That's what we practice. That's what we do here at Commercial Bank of California. Culture is at the heart of everything. It drives performance, happiness, engagement, innovation, and we work really hard, starting right at the top with the leadership team and the management team in practicing what we preach.
To understand the true power of how Commercial Bank of California can help you achieve your goals, give us a call at 714-431-7000 or visit us on the web at www.cbcal.com or at our new headquarters at 19752 MacArthur Boulevard in Irvine. Welcome back to this edition of Critical Mass Radio Show. I am your host, Rick Franzi. Sheriff Sandra Hutchins is our featured guest today, and we're going to be talking about the Great Escape Program in a little bit, but stay tuned. I'd like to thank and acknowledge our listeners who listen to our radio show as a podcast. Over the last 30 days, you've downloaded over 16,000 episodes. For you, we appreciate your growing and continued support here at the radio show. Of course, all of our shows can be heard live on octalkradio.net or rebroadcast from iTunes, Stitcher.com, Spreaker.com, hundreds of business-oriented websites where we've had past guests of middle market companies, as well as various business-oriented podcasting services. All right, Sheriff, tell us a little bit about your department, the size, number of jails, kind of your responsibility here in Orange County.
Right. Well, thank you for asking. We have about 4,000 employees, and that's about 50% non-sworn and 50% sworn. And then we are responsible for the county's 5 jails, where we have, on an average basis, about 6,800 inmates.
Wow.
We are the 8th largest jail in the United States. A lot of people are surprised about that. We are also responsible for all the unincorporated policing in the county, so we have a lot of unincorporated areas. And then we have 13 contract cities that have chosen to contract with us as their policing agency.
Okay,
we
so
also,
is that different than an unincorporated
Yes,
area?
unincorporated is, the little pockets like Coto de Caza and Trabuco Canyon, and, that are not a city per se. They're unincorporated county area, and then 13 contract cities.
Are you providing about the same service, whether it's, you're being contracted by a city because they don't have their own police force, right? They'd rather have the sheriff's department do the policing.
Right.
But so is that kind of the same level of community involvement then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Got it.
Yes, and then we also, by contract, we provide the security for all the courts in the county, and we also, for transportation, Orange County Transportation, we provide security there and at the airport, at John Wayne Airport.
Right.
And then the harbors, the 3 harbors in the county, we provide boat patrol. We have both crime and firefighting ability and homeland security responsibility for that.
Wow.
So
you got a lot going on there.
We got a lot going on. We got the only bomb squad in the county, so if there's any suspicious package anywhere in the county, our bomb squad is called out to take care of that. So,
how has the staffing been over the years? I mean, is 4,000 plus employees in your department, is that relatively stable number? Have you been affected by cutbacks? How does that work?
We have been affected by cutbacks. We did not hire for 2 years.
Really?
And so we did reduce our staffing. We've been able to hire some additional personnel. And we brought on another contract city that really kind of got us back to where, close to where we were.
Right.
But, since I've been in office, we have been fighting a, budget issue. We're largely funded by the half-cent sales tax,
Okay.
Prop 172 monies. And, of course, when the economy is not doing well, people aren't buying things, and
Right.
that impacts public safety. It impacts our ability to fund public safety as a county.
Wow. I did not appreciate the scale of the job until I was able to visit one of your facilities and kind of get background and get some context for the size and scope of the job and the variety of responsibility that you have,
Right.
which you just kind of talked about. It's a multifaceted and somewhat, I guess, interdepartmental responsibility that you have too, right?
Right. I'm also the coroner, and of course we have our crime lab that serves the whole county, serves all the police departments in terms of analyzing evidence of various natures. So it is. I mean, but it's a great place. It's great for recruitment because you can do so many different things. You could be a helicopter pilot. You
Right.
could work on one of the boats. You can work in patrol. You can work in one of the jails, crime lab. I mean, it's an incredible opportunity for people.
I have to ask you, and it just came to me, what percentage of your workforce is female?
On the sworn side, we
Not a
have
test.
about on the sworn side we have about I think it's about 9-10%.
Okay.
Not very high.
Right.
Not high enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, time will change that.
Time will change that.
So, we're talking with Sandra Hutchins. She
Yeah.
is Sheriff and Coroner of Orange County, California. What's the biggest challenge currently facing your department?
I would say right now it's the realignment, the prisoner realignment, which is a lot of people know as AB 109. That was the assembly bill that
Right.
allowed former people that would have gone to state prison. It realigned some of the sentencing that would cause them to do their sentence in a county jail versus the state prison. And the reason that all happened, I think, the state had been engaged in a lawsuit for over 2 decades over lack of medical care. Prisoners had brought this lawsuit against the state, and the state had been told by judges, to reduce the population, and it didn't happen. And so it got to critical mass, name of your show, critical mass.
Thank you.
And so Governor Brown had to come up with something, some way to deal with decreasing that population because the state, we were going to start getting, fined daily for millions of dollars, or they were going to have to release tens of thousands of prisoners to the streets. And so the governor came to the sheriffs in the state and others in the criminal justice system and said he needed help, and he wanted to do realignment. He was going to put money behind that realignment so that the prisoners who were, nonviolent, non-sexual, non-serious offenses, instead of going to state prison, would be sentenced to county jail.
Okay.
So that's our realignment population.
Any sense for how much that increased your population?
I have over 1,000
Wow.
prisoners in my custody who would have been in state prison.
So you were like at 5,000, now you're at 6,000?
Right.
So that's a significant...
Yeah, some of that is increases in our own county jail population, but at least 1,000 of that is due to realignment.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's why I wanted to talk to you, because when I met you the first time, which was at a Rotary event that you were the guest speaker for, part of what we talked about is, how do you help, and what are we doing to help inmates learn skills and trades so that maybe they stop a life of crime. And so we're going to be talking about, and I didn't realize the program was named The Great Escape, and after our next commercial break, we're going to come back, we're going to talk about that, because I think that has a real focus and appropriateness for the Orange County business community, because I think from what I learned from Greg Boston and other members of your staff that I spent the time with at the farm, it's a holistic approach that you're taking to solving this problem of recidivism and trying to help inmates learn different life skills and coping skills so that they don't return to prison and to a life of crime.
Exactly.
So
yes.
it's an amazing program, ladies and gentlemen, and one that I think the Orange County business community can certainly participate in, and I frankly think benefit from, Sandra. I think there's a lot of goodness behind understanding this program and seeing how other businesses can participate.
I do too.
Okay,
yeah.
So we're going to take our commercial break right now, ladies and gentlemen, because I want to get back and with Sandra Hutchins. She is the sheriff and coroner for Orange County, California. We're going to come back and talk about the Great Escape program after these words from our commercial sponsors.
Imagine what it would feel like to lose everything. Your job, your home, your family, your dignity. This has happened to thousands of the men, women, veterans, and young adults we serve at Working Wardrobes. What do we do to help? We provide career development services, life skills workshops, job skills training. We provide the perfect interview outfit, and we get clients placed in jobs. Call Working Wardrobes, 714-210-2460. Donate, volunteer, invest, hire.
Is for you. Do you ever feel isolated with no place to turn for advice or feedback? Who holds you accountable to your commitments in your company? Where do you find the right resources to help you and your company grow? If you have had these questions, then Critical Mass for Business might be the answer for you. Critical Mass for Business is committed to helping you make better decisions through the power of peer learning. These are groups of peers who are running businesses just like you. CEO Peer Groups provides a great sounding board to test fresh ideas and new concepts, review your strategic plans and tactical goals, and present issues and opportunities for a critical discussion. The result is improved strategy, accountability, and improved business results. If you are interested in learning more, go to www.criticalmassforbusiness.com and learn about our CEO Peer Groups. CEO Peer Groups is a registered trademark of Critical Mass for Business.
S&H Rubber is a manufacturing company in Fullerton, California. We specialize in custom molded, extruded, and stamped rubber parts. If your next job requires a rubber part, we would appreciate the opportunity to quote on it. We serve aerospace, automotive, and many other industries. We work with many types of rubber, including silicone, EPDM, neoprene, bunanitrile, and Viton. Our quality system is ISO and AS 9100 approved. Over our 47 years in business, the S&H brand has become known for superior quality, quick turnaround, and competitive pricing. Please check out our website at www.shrubber.com or call 714-525-0277. Let S&H be your sealing solution.
Welcome back to this edition of Critical Mass Radio Show. I am your host, Rick Franzi. Our featured guest today is Sheriff Sandra Hutchins of Orange County, California, and I'd like to let you know that our audience demographic is 98% business owners and executives who listen to learn from the experiences of our guests. If your firm is interested in reaching these top decision makers, then advertising on our radio show is the answer. Each month, our sponsors gain valuable exposure through their support of our radio show. And with our exclusive prospect engagement program, we deliver up to 23 warm prospects to each of our platinum advertisers each year. To learn more, contact Rose Chamorro, 951-515-4661. All right, let's return to Sheriff Sandra Hutchins. Sorry about that. We were talking about the Great Escape program. So first of all, let's, at a high level, describe the problem that the Great Escape program is attempting to solve.
Right. So we have this burgeoning jail population, which was a burgeoning state prison population. Wherever it's at, it's costing the taxpayers a lot of money because you have people coming in and out of jail. And it's the same people. I mean, you and I would sit here and think, if I ever went to jail, it would be one time and I would be out of there. There's no way I would come back. And there are those that first-time offenders you never see again. But there's this population that jail isn't always such a bad thing to them, you know, and they will come in and out of the facility because they know no other way of making a living, or it's drug or alcohol abuse and it's too hard to get off of, you know, that. And so they're committing crimes to support that. So what we're trying to do is reduce the recidivism rate. If you remember, in the state prison, the recidivism rate was like 70%. Just above 70%, very high. That's
7-0.
That's 7-0. That's people coming back into the system. And so we have been doing programming for years for our inmates in county jail. We've had the Great Escape, we've had other programs. We are kicking them up a notch, and we are doing more of them. And so the Great Escape is just one of those programs. And what the Great Escape is when someone comes into our custody, we do an evaluation on them, kind of like a counselor would at a school. What do they need? What are their issues? Is it drug abuse? Is it alcohol abuse? Domestic violence? And then we get them into a program, and one of them is cognitive change. We get them, it's called lasting change, and they're housed together, they go to class together, and we try to change the way they think about things. And then it gets down to things as simple as, how do you go on a job interview? We find out that people don't know how to interview for a job, how to fill out an application for a job, just basic skills. And another exciting project we're working on is we have GED testing, but we're trying to get actually a classroom like high school, like a high school classroom there. So if you, even before you go to jail, if you get hooked up with the probation system, you get an offense, you get put on probation, we start you in these classes. If you end up in jail, we continue with the classes. If you haven't finished to get your high school diploma, and this is all up through the age of 30, we continue that outside of custody. Of course, we have to have their cooperation to do that, but that's the next thing that we're working on, to give them the job skills that they need to go out and get a job and break that cycle of coming back to jail, because it's costing taxpayers so much money to keep people in custody.
What an average cost to keep an inmate?
Well, it's difficult to give you an average cost, because it depends on a lot of things. Is that person on kidney dialysis?
Right.
That's going to cost a lot.
You have to care for all their needs.
You have to care for all of their medical needs, and that's a cost to the county.
Right. When you were gracious enough to have me visit one of your facilities, the Muzak facility in Irvine, affectionately referred to as the farm?
The farm.
Okay.
Right.
First of all, I loved it because when I got to the gate, the sheriff that was manning the gate told me, if there's two people in this car when you leave, I'm not going to let you leave. And I thought, I don't want to leave if there's another person in this car, because I'm not expecting anybody to leave with me. But Greg and the team were very thoughtful with me. I actually got to watch one of the classes where the instructors were working with this hand-picked group of inmates, helping them with life skills. And the conversation that they were sharing with me and with the instructors is, I'm sure a lot of us have been out there on a job interview, and we know sometimes on our resume we have some weak spots that we're hoping that the interviewer won't ask us about. Imagine if you have to tell them that you're convicted of a major crime. That is a mental thing for the inmates to have to get over, worrying that people will automatically just discount them because of that experience. Even if they want in the best way to not repeat, to actually that was a mistake and it's not going to happen again. So you're carrying that baggage, and one of the things I thought was very powerful was how they were helping them cope just with something that simple but yet very pragmatic and difficult to overcome in many job interviews.
Right, and it sounds simple to us, but the simplest things are difficult to them because they just haven't had the skills. They haven't had the example set in many cases in their families. Sometimes it's generational. It's been spending time in jail. I've worked the jails, and I've seen that, and that was, I think, early in my career, the most surprising thing to me is that people would come back to jail. And that's something that really the public needs to know, that if they do become institutionalized, where jail is more comfortable. I mean, you hear stories of people that, when they get out of jail, they'll still stay in their room and keep it very dark because they're just not acclimated to living outside of that environment.
One of the things that I was impressed with is the discipline by which you select the inmates, the criteria that you use to find the right people who have the best chance to benefit from the program.
Well, actually, we didn't take the easy ones. We took the ones that we call frequent flyers, the very ones that come in and out of jail all the time.
Right.
We wanted to target that group to see if we could make a difference with them. And Governor Brown came down to look at the same program you did, and he went into the classroom and he was talking to the inmates that were in that class that day. And he talked to one of them, and he said, well, how many years have you been in jail? He goes, well, in and out, yeah, about, 40 years. And the governor said, why?
Right.
And he said, well, I'm a meth addict. I thought that was pretty telling,
Right.
the start, that many years.
Right.
But he was saying really good things about the program, the inmate was. And hopefully, maybe we can keep him off meth.
The reason why you're sitting in this chair today is what I realized from that time at the farm is, regardless of how great your program is in the jail system, if that person comes out and cannot find a job, there is a whole community ready to pull him or her back into the life that got them into jail the first time. And if they can't find gainful employment, what choice do they have many times but to go back to what they know that got them in trouble the last time? So for me, a linchpin in making the program successful is helping to find that person a job.
Right. And we're working with nonprofits on the outside and businesses to make that happen. But we need more businesses to be willing to step up and help us get jobs for some of these folks. It's too easy to hit the reset button and go back to where you came from.
Right.
And if they get too frustrated out there and don't think that they have another choice, they're going to go back to using drugs or using alcohol and doing the things that they do to support that habit, which is crime.
You take them out of the general population when they're in the jail system and they're in this program. You're helping to reframe their thinking, and it's a holistic approach. It's all kind of training, not just job skills and education, but it's life skills, it's coping skills, it's a lot of anger management. There's a lot of things that you're doing for that inmate. And they've demonstrated as an individual a desire to change. And they put themselves through, I think, what is a rigorous program for them. It's not easy to be in this program and to stay in it for the term. And that's why I'm so glad that you're here, because I think I'm employing Orange County business owners to think about, this is a person that's demonstrated a willingness to work hard to change their life. What a great potential new employee that person is, regardless of what they've done beforehand. You sort of have to give them a second chance.
You do. You do. And I had a friend who, this is what he did. I mean, he had a business, and he hired people who had come out of jail or prison, and he had it was a great experience. He really was successful with them and successful at his business, and they made good employees.
Right.
So it's just getting that opportunity.
I think in the area of construction, manufacturing, labor, there's a lot of need for people who have some level of skill but can work hard and get trained to get the actual skills they need to do well in those jobs. I think there are plenty of potential employers here in Orange County that maybe aren't recognizing the amount of money and effort that's being put in by the county to help these inmates to be able to pick them up. And I'm glad that the nonprofits are stepping in the middle, because they're kind of bridging them, as Women Helping Women is doing with skills and apparel. But at the end of the day, these people need a job.
They do. And yeah, the nonprofits have been really great in terms of, that critical time is when they're released.
Right.
Because when they're in custody, we get them sober, we get them off drugs, they get their medical care, they get well, they get healthy, and then, we give them this training and counseling and get them up and ready. And so that critical moment, that moment where we can fail as a society, is at the point where they get released and there's no net out there.
Right.
There's no other place for them to go.
Right.
And it's not going to work for everybody. We realize that. We're not naive about that. But if we could get a small percentage, it would make such a difference. I mean, we're the 8th largest jail in the nation. We shouldn't be. I mean, we shouldn't be proud that we're the 8th largest jail in the nation, because it's costing taxpayers a lot of money.
Right.
Where if we could turn part of that around and reduce that population, these people could do meaningful work in society and not be a burden.
Well, I see it the other way, too, in the sense that for every case that's successful, for every individual that you get on a different path, they're an icon in the community for others who wish they had another way out. But in some ways, the only way is the criminal way.
Right.
I think we cannot discount that is in fact, if you want to be gainfully employed, sometimes the easiest way to do it is through criminal activity, right?
Right.
And so, if there's no other option, what choice do you have other than moving and doing things that most people aren't going to be doing? So, but if there's some people who are pillars in the community said, no, I did this and I got out, I'm living a different life now. Those are the people that are more credible to convince the younger generation there is a different way than anything you and I can do. It's one of their own.
Well, they are, and those are some of our better people that come into the jail to talk to our inmates. You know, those that have been in their shoes and now are living a good life and are have a job and have a family, and so that really helps when they can talk to someone like that.
Right, because I think, admittedly, there is a risk that you run by hiring somebody who has a criminal past. I understand that, but there's also a great deal of money and effort been put into helping these people to change, and the part that motivates me the most is they have to want to be in the program.
Right.
They're not forced to. They can drop out at any time.
Right.
And it's not a free ride. It's not like, by being selected and put in this program, you get out of all the nastiness that we do in a jail. You're actually being worked pretty hard. There's rigorous training and education that goes on there. I've seen the books, and I know the tests, and the process is not a free ride.
No, absolutely. They have to volunteer for it. We cannot make them do anything in terms of, being involved in a program or working, for that matter, in the jail. That's all voluntary. And so these are people that have decided, hey, I want to do this. I mean, I was talking to a young woman who had been in and out of our jail for numerous times for drugs, always drugs. And she said, they kept asking me to be involved in the Great Escape, and I said, no, I wasn't ready. And they asked me again, the next time I come back to jail, no, I'm not ready. The third time, I was ready to be part of the Great Escape, and I was sitting next to her at a Great Escape graduation. We have a graduation when they've been, clean and sober for over a year.
Uh-huh.
She's sitting next to me. She says, I never sat next to a deputy before when I didn't have handcuffs on.
Oh, wow.
So, it was great to see, this young woman finally make it, but she had to be ready for that.
Right.
She wasn't ready the first few times.
Right, which is why the program must continue and continue to have success,
Right.
so that you can move it forward and get the support you want. We just have about 2 minutes left until the next break, but you touched on something that I sort of was made aware of at the farm, which is many times women inmates are more even victimized than men in their life outside of jail, in that there is almost a predatory life that they've led where they've been the victim of the males in their life many times, and it's even harder for them sometimes to break out of this cycle because of that.
That's right. Sometimes jail, if you think about it, if they're being abused, if they've been a prostitute and they've had a pimp and someone who's been beats them up, or they don't have a place to stay, or they've been living on the streets, jail's not a bad place to go for them.
Because
it's
sometimes
safe.
It can even be family members that are victims.
It can even be family members, and it's safe for them to be in jail, because sometimes that it's not so, again, that goes back to it's not so bad, because they get to have clean sheets and a place to sleep, and they are safe.
And someone looking out for them.
Someone looking out for them.
Ladies and gentlemen, I know that generally we talk about business topics. I believe in the power of peer learning, which is why I think this program is really powerful. I'm so honored that Sheriff Sandra Hutchins is our guest for this entire hour so that we could talk about this program, because I think there is more that the Orange County business community can do to help the sheriff and the others who are working so hard to lower the recidivism rate of these key inmates and people here in Orange County, fellow citizens of the county of Orange County, here in Orange County, California. Did I say Orange County enough for you? Hopefully I did. All right, we're going to take a short commercial break. When we come back, we're going to talk with Sandra Hutchins in the last segment of Critical Mass Radio Show after these words from our commercial sponsors.
There's something positive about the word up. When things are looking good, they're looking up. When someone's down, you cheer them up. So how do you move up? Well, when it comes to getting your bachelor's or master's degree, there's one university that stacks up, Brandman University. Brandman is ranked by U.S. News & World Report as one of the nation's top 10 universities for online bachelor's programs. Brandman's online graduate programs in business and education also receive top honors. So look us up at brandman.edu. Brandman University. Move up.
Smart Business Network is a business-to-business multimedia company providing insight, advice, and strategy for C-level executives of fast-growth, middle-market, and large companies. As one of the nation's largest publishers of local management journals, under the Smart Business name, Smart Business Network publishes 19 regional print editions, presents dozens of large and small-scale business conferences and award programs, and produces a vibrant interactive digital media presence. For more information, visit us at www.sbnonline.com.
UPS Protection has been protecting systems in the U.S. against brownouts, blackouts, and poor quality power for over 25 years. We provide power protection systems, including UPS, lighting inverters, generators, and service for clients from coast to coast. We specialize in solving all your power needs. As a direct reseller of the best brands in the industry, including Liebert, PowerWare, and APC, we can solve all your power protection needs. Protecting your power is our main goal. We offer on-site or depot repair of our critical equipment. To better serve your budget constraints, UPS Protection also offers both reconditioned and new products.
Welcome back to this edition of Critical Mass Radio Show. Sheriff Sandra Hutchins is our guest. She's the sheriff of Orange County, California. So let's talk about the Advisory Council. Can you share with us a little bit about the Advisory Council?
Yes, we have a great group called the Sheriff's Advisory Council, and there's about 500 members of that council, and they're business people in all walks of life, and the only thing that they're doing for us is they want to help the Sheriff's Department. And so they want to help us financially. They want to help us with, support. We have regular monthly meetings where I attend, and they talk about ways that they can help with the Sheriff's Department. They've purchased guns for our SWAT personnel. They've purchased canines, for us to use in our crime fighting, bomb dogs, narcotics dogs, you name it. And they helped raise funds to relocate our Peace Officers Memorial for the county, for all law enforcement officers in the county. It was over at the Santa Ana Plaza, and we have a beautiful facility now, thanks to them, at our Sheriff's Academy in Tustin. So it's a place for the family members to go who have lost officers in the line of duty. And we have a service every year there, but the family members can go there anytime. They have a beautiful walkway where they can sit, benches where they can sit and reflect, and so and then part of the Sheriff's Advisory Council is our Drug Uses Life Abuse program, where they fund sheriff's officers who work on the campuses of the schools, specifically targeting drugs and substance abuse on campus, and training both parents and children about the dangers of substance abuse.
I've heard you talk a lot about substance abuse and drugs. Obviously, it's a problem across the country. Any more of a problem in Orange County than other places that you've seen, or?
It's no more and no less. I think there's this misunderstanding in Orange County. I mean, I've been asked when I've been out speaking in Orange County, do we have a drug problem in Orange County? Yes, we do have a drug problem in Orange County. We have, just like the rest of the nation, we have kids now getting addicted to painkillers, prescription painkillers, and when they can't get those anymore, they go to heroin. So we have an upsurge in heroin. I have people talk about how terrible the cartels are, the violence, and is that spilling over the border? Well, we're responsible for those cartels because most of the drugs are sold right here in the United States. So it's our drug use, I think, that fuels that cartel trade, definitely fuels the cartel trade in Mexico. So I think a part of this is keeping young people out of jail in the beginning.
Right.
So I think the prevention programs are so important. Education about drug use. I think a lot of our kids think one time can't hurt me, one time can kill you.
Right.
One time can get you addicted and get you on that path.
That's what's scary.
That's what's scary, and that's what I think a lot of
There's
of
no
our children don't
experimenting
know.
with some of these
There's
drugs.
No experimenting with some of them. They're very powerful.
Very powerful, and
drugs.
they rewire your brain chemistry so that you become addicted from the first time. And that crosses all socioeconomic boundaries.
It does. It does.
No North County, South County, East County, West County. It's everywhere.
It's
and
everywhere.
Almost in the more affluent areas, you can see how that may be even more of a problem because there's more accessibility and maybe ability to procure the product.
Right. And so if you talk to anybody who's in our jails, it doesn't matter what their charge is, most of them will have been, it's substance abuse, it's either alcohol or drug abuse in their lives. And so, and it's hard to turn somebody around. We're talking about recidivism programs. It's hard to turn around that 42-year methamphetamine addict, it's much easier to stop that child from starting to use drugs if we can educate them that it's a danger to use drugs.
Right.
And, have the courage not to go along with your peers. And we're trying to educate parents on how to talk to their children about it and how to check and make sure, know what the signs are of drug use.
Both of my children graduated from a high school in South County, and I asked them after they had graduated, maybe a little bit late, but were the drugs prevalent in their high school? And they were like, Dad, they were in every bathroom. If you wanted it, you could find it, and it wasn't very far under the surface. And I thought, wow, that's very scary to me.
It is.
Because you just don't know kids at that age, how they make decisions.
Right.
I was fortunate with our two, but, it's very easy, and it leads you on a path you really don't want to be on. So I think parents can't be too vigilant. We ask, and I'm speaking with Sheriff Sandra Hutchins here on Critical Mass Radio Show. We have about 5 minutes left on our radio program. I like to ask my guests your guiding principle. In other words, of all the things that you've learned in your professional career, do you have an overarching philosophy or an approach to which you're using now to lead the Sheriff's Department? And if so, would you share that with our audience?
Yes, empowering the people in my organization, it doesn't matter what level they are, to be leaders themselves. And I push them to make decisions. The old model of leadership was top-down, wait for the next order, particularly in a paramilitary organization. Well, it doesn't work. You don't get the best, the most creativity out of people that way. And so I tell people, come up with the ideas. Don't be afraid to make a mistake. We can't, if your heart's in the right place, run with it. You don't have to come check with me on everything. So I try and empower them, and it's worked. It just has worked for me, because when I do that, when I trust the people that work for me, what I find is that they give me things that I could never have thought about. I also know I'm not the smartest one in the room, and I think that's very important for leaders, and don't be intimidated by that, because it doesn't matter what business, law enforcement, or it doesn't matter what business you're in today, it's so specialized.
Right.
And you can't possibly know everything. I know probably about an inch deep of everything on the department. But the other things are technical, and I have to rely on the people that I have selected in those jobs to do their job and to be leaders in that endeavor. So that is the style. That is my guiding principle, and it's just trust people until they prove you wrong.
Right.
And it's worked for me.
Congratulations on that.
Yeah.
You're the CEO of a 4,000, is that what you said?
Yes.
4,000 person company, and which gets a lot of media attention. Right?
Yeah.
So, and I love having people like you on the show. I had the chairman of Angels Baseball. There's a lot of ink about sports. There's ink about you. Many of in my audience, they get very little ink. Imagine how different the job is and the decisions that you make if you know that there's someone watching your decisions, interpreting them, and writing about them, and having opinions based on it.
Right.
Your client, you have many different stakeholders.
Yes.
Right? And truth be told, your inmates are your stakeholders as well.
They are. Yes, we do. And it's part of law enforcement is sometimes viewed as the necessary evil. It's necessary, but we have to be careful to balance people's freedoms with how we enforce the law.
Right.
And that changes over time. We get a lot of ink. We should get a lot of ink because we should be because we're given a lot of power. I only ask that it be balanced ink.
Right.
That at least they would ask, and we have an opportunity to discuss, explain what happened, because our folks are going to make mistakes. We're going to have some people that do things that they shouldn't do.
You have 4,000 people.
Yeah, 4,000 people. Half of them have guns. What could go wrong? Is what I always say. But it's a reality, that we face, and I'm used to being in the public eye. Look, I'll stand up and say when we did something wrong. I think that's the best thing anybody can do, regardless of your business. If you stand up and say, look, we could have done better on this. We're looking at it. We're going to correct that. And I've done that. I mean, we've had to have done that so many times. But I will tell you, I wish, on the other side of that, I wish that the media could see what I see. And I see people doing tremendous jobs, serving the public every day, going out of their way to do beyond what they're required to do to serve the public. I mean, checking up on our elderly folks. You know, I've deputy sheriffs that kind of adopt someone in the community, and they'll go check on, make sure they're okay,
Right.
just because nobody else is doing it. Those kinds of things that I see in the letters I get, you know, are just make me so proud.
Well, you know, it's probably just the tip of the iceberg, but I can tell you from the Great Escape program, the thoughtful people that you have running that program who generally are committed to making a difference at that level and helping the inmates to change their life and to apply some really great talent and knowledge and education to make that move in the right direction compelled me to want to have you here in the studio today, because I think it's the responsibility now of the business community to assist you and step up even more than we already have to give jobs to these people. That's, at the end of the day, without those jobs, everything else is just a great effort that probably isn't going to get the return, because these people need jobs, and we need to partner with you. So if someone listening to the radio show now, Sandra, or in the future as a podcast on iTunes says, I think I want to learn more about this and how I might be able to become a part of the Great Escape program or the Advisory Council, how do they get information about that?
They can just go to our website at ocsd.org, and we have all the information on how to volunteer or how to contact us, you know, how to contact our custody division folks who are working with these inmates, our Sheriff's Advisory Council, our reserve program, our PSR, our public safety responder program, who are volunteers. There's countless ways to get involved.
Right, and I think those are all great programs, and the focus for me today is the Great Escape program, and I'd like to implore any business owner or executive who has something in their past that somebody gave them a hand up to help them out, gave them a chance when they maybe really needed it. Remember how beneficial that was to your career, and that's what I'm suggesting that this Great Escape program can be for a lot of people here in Orange County, and I think it's the business community's responsibility to try to help as much as possible to find successful, gainful employment for these individuals. Sheriff Hutchins, thank you for your time. I've enjoyed this so much.
Thank you. Me too.
Thanks for being a friend of the program. Welcome to our community.
Thank you so
Critical
much.
Mass Business
Thank
community.
you.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for listening to the program today. Of course, this would not be possible without our advertisers, and I'd like to thank all of our advertisers, and there are quite a few of them: Brandman University, Center Club, Commercial Bank of California, Decision Toolbox, MBN Design, Smart Business Magazine, S&H Rubber, Succession Strategies, our longest-termed sponsor, Succession Strategies, Tone Software, and UPS Protection. I want to thank Paul Roberts, our engineer for today, and Crystal Nunley, our producer, as well as the rest of the team that helps put Critical Mass Radio Show together. If you'd like our business, Critical Mass for Business, visit my website, criticalmass4business.com. Until the next show, this is Rick Franzi saying I hope all of your business decisions will move your company in a positive direction.
You have been listening to Critical Mass Radio Show Business Talk Show, focused on exploring topics of interest to CEOs who are leading middle market companies. With your host, Richard Franzi.
Welcome to Talent Talk Radio Show, brought to you by People G2, a company dedicated to helping all businesses with their people-related decisions. They do that by giving clients access to the best human capital, due diligence and background checks available on prospective candidates, business partners, tenants, and more. To learn more, simply visit www.peopleg2.com. Today, we're privileged to have with us the founder and president of People G2, Chris Dyer. Hey, Chris.
Good afternoon, and thank you for joining me. Again, my name is Chris Dyer, and I'll be your host for the next hour. In case you're tuning in for the first time, the Talent Talk Radio Show features a wide range of guests who care about talent and are uniquely talented themselves. So in this show, we talk about talent in two ways. First, as it relates to success and uncovering the secrets of really talented people. And second, we also talk about talent in relation to human resources and how HR leaders find the best candidates today. So hopefully you see how that works. The word talent has a couple different meanings in the business world, and this show really looks to explore those two areas as best we can. My guests typically include CEOs, entrepreneurs, HR executives, coaches, thought leaders, just the gamut of great people out in the business world that we'd love to have them share their stories. So what generally happens is I'm out at networking events or industry conferences, and I have the privilege of meeting inspiring leaders all the time. In fact, today's guest, who we're going to be focusing on for the entirety of the show, is someone who I met out in Vail, Colorado at the HR.com show. I was fortunate enough to have been recognized myself, but he was there as one of the keynote speakers, and I found a way to somehow get him to appear on the show, and we're really delighted he's going to be there today with us for the whole hour. I generally created this forum to allow you to listen in our dialogue and hopefully learn some practical advice that will impact your own career in a positive way. So before I get to my guest, Marshall Goldsmith, I want to thank those of you tuning in live today. Don't forget, you can submit your questions to him right now via Twitter by just sending them to @PeopleG2. Use that hashtag, all one word, Talent Talk. And my producer, Mike, will feed me the best questions, and we'll try to work them into the show amongst the other things that we have ready to ask him. Don't forget, you can also listen to this show on iTunes or Android. Just subscribe to the podcast of Talent Talk. We already have 33,000 people that are downloading and listening to the show every single week, and we really appreciate your support and taking the time to listen now on the treadmill or on the drive home or wherever you're deciding to share with us. So with that said, let's get today's show started. My guest is Marshall Goldsmith. He's a renowned business coach and author. He's also a generally really nice guy. He has also been named one of the top 10 most influential business thinkers in the world, and one of the top-ranked executive coaches recently at the 2013 Biennial Thinkers 50 ceremony in London. And there's many more accolades we can talk about in books, but we'll get to that in just a second. But let me get to the beginning here, and that's to welcome you. Thank you, Marshall, for being on the show.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
I'm sure we'll get into your background a bit more as we talk, but maybe you can give the listeners a little idea of who you are in case they've been living under a rock or they don't read business books, who you are and what you do.
Well, my name is Marshall Goldsmith. I'm from a small town in Kentucky called Valley Station, Kentucky. Went to engineering school at a little school, Rose-Hulman Institute of Technology in Indiana. Got an MBA at Indiana U, PhD at the Anderson School at UCLA. I was college professor and dean at Loyola when I was very young. Then for 37 years, I've done three things. One is I give talks or teach classes. I travel all around the world teaching executives, and now about half of my teaching is outside the U.S. Two, which I'm most famous for, is I coach executives. And my coaching clients are the CEOs or could be CEOs of huge organizations. For example, I'm having dinner on Sunday with Alan Mulally, who just retired as the CEO of Ford, was ranked as CEO of the Year in the United States. Jonathan Klein, CEO of Getty Images. Ian Reed, CEO of Pfizer. Deanna Mulligan, CEO of Guardian Life. Just a bunch of wonderful people. So my coaching, and Dr. Jim Kim, President of World Bank. My coaching clients are CEOs or could be CEOs of huge organizations. And what I love about coaching is that's where I learn everything. Then the third thing I do is write and edit books and articles. So I've done about 35 books, sold a couple million copies, and 2 New York Times bestsellers. My most popular book is called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And writing is how I reach people.
Been introduced to your writing originally, but the way you and I got connected, as I mentioned before, was at the conference when you were speaking and really talking about some of the really interesting topics and points of view that you bring into the conversation, and which is why today is actually our 1-year anniversary of this radio show, which is why we wanted to have you here to kind of celebrate that and have someone really impactful for our listeners to help us celebrate beyond putting a candle on a piece of carrot cake.
Thank you, number one, for inviting me, and number two, congratulations.
Thank you. You mentioned your writing, and let's maybe talk about that for a second. You're a prolific writer. I remember seeing large stacks in your house there of all the different books and translated in many different languages. So if today was the first time that someone had met you, and didn't know anything about you or your work, maybe what's the one book you would suggest that they read to kind of start off and get a taste for what you're about and what you're trying to teach?
I would recommend they start with the book, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. Second, I'd recommend go to my website, www.marshallgoldsmith.com. I give everything away, so all my material they can copy, share, download, duplicate, use in church, charity, nonprofit. I've got hundreds of videos online. They can go to YouTube and see, hundreds of videos. So I give everything away, so hopefully anybody would like to use any of my material, use it any way you want. If you have any listeners in Japan, we just had 150 articles translated into Japanese.
So what is it about that book that you think really resonates with people?
I had the privilege before he died of spending 50 days with Peter Drucker, the world's authority on management.
Mm-hmm.
I was on his advisory board for 10 years. Peter Drucker said, we spend a lot of time helping leaders learn what to do. We don't spend enough time helping leaders learn what to stop. Well, that book was one of the first books that really addresses the issue of teaching successful people what to stop, the problems that occur with success. We all talk about the blessings that occur with success. We don't talk about the challenges that come with success. Unique ideas for helping successful leaders achieve positive long-term change in behavior.
And what are some of those problems that come along for successful people that they tend to have to deal with?
Well, one of the most common is I was interviewed in the Harvard Business Review and asked a question. What is the number one problem of all the successful people that you've ever worked with over the years? And my answer, winning too much. What does that mean? If it's important we want to, win. Meaningful, win. Critical, win. Trivial, win. Not worth it, win anyway. Winners love winning. Successful people are winners in the game of life, and it's hard for them not to constantly win. I'll give you a case study that almost all my successful clients fail, and almost all of your listeners will fail as a case study. And when I say failed, they will fail themselves. Here is the case study. You want to go to dinner at restaurant X. Your husband, wife, partner, friend wants to go to dinner at restaurant Y. A heated argument. You go to restaurant Y. It was not your choice. The food tastes awful and the service is terrible. Option A, critique the food. Point out our partner was wrong. This mistake could have been avoided had only you listened to me. Option B, shut up. Eat the stupid food, try to enjoy it, and have a nice evening. What would I do? What should I do? Almost all my clients, what would I do? Critique the food. What should I do? Shut up.
Right.
Second classic problem, adding too much value, especially for engineers, technically trained people. What's that mean? I'm young, smart, enthusiastic. I come to you with an idea. You think it's a great idea. Rather than just saying great idea, our natural tendency is to say, that's a nice idea. Why don't you add this to it? The problem is the quality of the idea may go up 5%. My commitment to execute the idea may go down 50%. It's no longer my idea. Now it's yours. Mm-hmm. Incredibly difficult for smart, successful people not to constantly go through life adding value. One of my good coaching clients retired a few years ago. His name is J.P. Garnier. He was CEO of GlaxoSmithKline. I said, what'd you learn about leadership as the CEO of this huge company? He said, I learned a hard lesson. My suggestions become orders. He said, if they're smart, they're orders. And if they're stupid, they're orders. And if I want them to be orders, they're orders. And if I don't, they're orders anyway. I asked him, what'd you learn from me when I was your executive coach that helped you the most? He said, you taught me one lesson that helped me be a better leader and have a happier life. I asked him, what was that lesson? He said, before I speak, stop and breathe and ask myself one question. Is it worth it? And he said, as the CEO of this huge company, 50% of the time I've had the discipline to stop and breathe and ask myself, is it worth it? What did I decide? Am I right? Maybe. Is it worth it? No.
But it's almost like you go through this process to become this great successful person, then you almost have to rewire yourself or reinvent yourself in a way to continue to be successful. Am I paraphrasing that correctly?
Totally correct. Because what happens is, see, at the bottom, you're an achiever. At the top, you're a leader. There's a big difference. One of my great coaching clients, Alan Mullally, taught me a great lesson. He said, every day I drive to work, I tell myself leadership is not about me. Leadership is about them. For the great achiever, it's all about me. Me winning, me being right, me being smart, me achieving something. For the great leader, it's all about them. Them winning, them being right, them being smart, them achieving. Very hard to make this transition.
Yeah, very hard. And I imagine, how do you see that being different from, let's say, the CEO of mine or the CEO of a small $5 million company that's, doing local business? Do you see a difference there in how those two CEOs would interact with their people?
In some ways, it's even harder for founders.
Mm-hmm.
Hard for a founder to let go. I've worked with a lot of founders before, and, it's hard. I mean, I mentioned Jonathan Klein. It's a multi-billion-dollar business, but he is one of the founders of Getty Images.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really tough for a founder to let go. Why? It's in your heart. It's not just a business. It's you. It's your identity. One of the biggest challenges of founders is just that, of letting go, delegating, realizing it can't be all about them if they're going to grow the business.
It's a tough challenge. I know I wrestle with it all the time being a founder.
Sure.
So we talked a little bit there about, what are some of the things that CEOs have as a challenge, but what are maybe some of the things that CEOs and leaders are doing right now at this moment in time? Are there things that you're kind of seeing that we are getting right that, any good CEO should really be looking at, making sure they're doing right as well?
Oh, yeah. Well, the people I work with all share some common characteristics. One, they have the courage to look in the mirror. And they have the humility, they can admit they can improve, and they have the discipline to follow up and work hard and stick with it and focus on improvement. Courage, discipline, and humility. If you want to be a better leader, those are 3 good ingredients. It's hard to look in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to have the humility to admit, you can do better, and it's hard to have the disciplined effort to follow up and improve. If you do that, though, you can get better, and a lot of leaders that I work with do.
And you said, it's hard to look in the mirror. Does it generally take somebody, though, to kind of help you? I guess you could use the example of maybe someone holding the mirror for you and kind of helping you make sure you're looking into that. Is that a part of that really good process for someone to grow and get better?
Well, the answer there is yes, that's what I do. I have somebody calls me up on the phone every day and listens to me answer 32 questions. By the way, I'm now going to teach your leaders a process. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
This is a process, and you can use it yourself. This is a process will help you get better at almost anything. Takes 2 minutes a day and costs nothing. It's called the daily question process. Now, every day, a woman named Kate calls me on the phone. Every day, she listens to me read 32 questions that I wrote and provide 32 answers that I wrote. Somebody asked me, why do I have somebody call me on the phone every day? Don't I know the theory about how to change behavior? I wrote the theory about how to change behavior. That's why I have somebody call me on the phone every day. I know how hard it is. I have 11 million frequent flyer miles on one airline. That's an excuse to be an alcoholic, an excuse to be divorced, an excuse to be out of shape. A lot of excuses I can make with 11 million miles. Those excuses don't matter. It's hard for you. It's hard for me. It's hard for everybody to do what we need to do in life. Well, here's the way it works. Get out an Excel spreadsheet. On one column, you write down a series of questions. These questions represent what are important for you in your life. Every question has to be answered with yes, no, or number. 7 boxes across, one for every day of the week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Fill it out every day. Now, I'll share some of my questions. They're not intended to be yours. And if any of your listeners would like all my questions, send me an email, marshall@marshallgoldsmith.com. I'll send you all the questions. But the idea is you write your own questions. One of mine every day is, how many times yesterday did you try to prove you were right when it was not worth it? I've almost never got a 0 my whole life. It's kind of hard for that old professor not to be right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, how about you? Do you occasionally try to be right a little too much?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, and I know you and I talked about this spreadsheet a little bit, and I can tell everyone it's hard to do.
It's very hard.
And it's hard to, not only is it hard to do, it's hard to keep doing it. And that's where I feel like I keep failing, as I get busy or I get, I'm out of town or whatever, and I stumble and I don't do it, and then it's really hard to get back into trying to do it again. And
it's tough.
Yeah.
It's incredibly humbling. Another one of my questions is, how many angry or destructive comments did I make about people? How many minutes did I walk? Did I say or do something nice for my wife, my son, my daughter? Just a bunch of questions about writing and coaching and teaching and life, health. It's hard to do because what happens is every day you have to look in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
And what I teach people is, every company pretty much has these value plaques on the wall. They all say the same thing, customer and quality and people and all such stuff. Those are talk values. If you want to know your real values, you just make that list, fill it out every day, and at the end of the week, the Excel spreadsheet gives you a scorecard. And as you've already learned, that picture at the end of the week is not quite as pretty as those plaques on the wall.
Yes.
You do this every day. You learn life is real easy to talk. Life is hard to live.
Mm-hmm. It's hard to live, especially the way that you know you should live or the way you want to live. I almost pulled the question off my spreadsheet, have I worked on my book today? Because I kept saying no, and my score was, 0. It was terrible. And I just got, am I not making enough time? I started to almost avoid it because I knew I needed to be doing it. But it's tough, and it shines a light almost on some of those little areas where you're failing. You're saying maybe you don't want to be reminded about.
It's a great example because, writing is hard.
Mm-hmm.
I know.
Yeah.
I'm working on my new book today.
Right. So that kind of gets into what leaders can do. And for those of you who are listening live, don't forget we will have this as a podcast. So if you're furiously writing notes, don't worry. You can download the podcast later on and hear Marshall's site and his email again and his suggestions a little bit later. We talked a little bit about this here at the beginning about what CEOs and leaders are doing as it comes to failing. And you said about trying to be right and trying to add on their little spin to these great ideas or focusing on winning too much. But are there other areas that you commonly see leaders failing, maybe outside of where you're coaching, but just in general?
One is just spending time to coach and develop people.
Mm-hmm.
Executives are busy. And what I really want to have happen as a CEO is I want to call you in the office. You're a 55-year-old man, say. I want to call you in and say, you really need to listen better. And I want to have some fantasy that your entire life is going to change. And you're going to be a better listener because of these wise comments. And your entire life will change because I sprinkled some tidbits of wisdom on your head. Well, it doesn't quite work that way.
Mm-hmm.
People I coach are incredibly gifted, brilliant people who want to get better and work hard. It's not easy. Why? It's not easy to change.
Right.
And one of the problems that CEOs have is they're so busy. They want to just be able to say 3 or 4 words and expect the entire world is going to change, and they're not going to have to follow up, and they're not going to have to coach people, and they're not going to have to stick with it. What I try to teach them is that's not the way the real world is.
Yeah, that can be a huge challenge, especially like you said, as they rise up to that particular level. Making that change is huge. I know. It feels like no matter how much I communicate to my staff, they still would like more.
Of course.
That's always. I always feel like, well, geez, I really over communicated this week, and I could still get feedback. No, we'd like a little bit more.
Yep.
And that's partly because I think I can communicate it in 3 or 4 words or a sentence instead of writing, or really going into it in depth like I should.
Free coaching for you. Are you ready?
Yes.
You just illustrated one of the biggest problems of all the people I've ever coached in the world. It's called the fundamental attribution error. We look at other people and we think, I understand this. Why don't they?
Uh-huh.
Why aren't they like me? One of the leaders who I just totally respect recently got fired. General Eric Shinseki was head of the VA. General Shinseki was head of the U.S. Army, just a wonderful human being, got shot twice, an American hero. He just got fired as head of the VA. What did he do wrong? And he said it was fundamental attribution error. He said, I have integrity. I'm used to being around people with integrity. It never dawned on me that people would lie to me. That's what happened. People did lie to him. They weren't him. Well, when we deal with others, we kind of expect they're going to be us. Sometimes they are. Sometimes, in his case, unfortunately, they weren't. They did lie to him.
That's especially true to people we like, too. It's very, very easy if you get along with someone, you feel some similarities or characteristics with another person, then it's an easy trap to then assume that everything else about them and how they're going to interact is going to be just like you.
Exactly. The other thing is, the higher up you go, the more people suck up to you. So you start believing that, they like your jokes and they think you're smart and, whatever.
Yeah.
And they agree with you all the time. Well, they're oftentimes just sucking up.
Yeah, absolutely. We've definitely seen that one. Well, we have a lot more questions to ask for you, Marshall. If you just want to hold on a moment, we're going to take our first quick commercial break. We'll be back here in just about a minute, and we'll get into the next good set of questions.
Thank you.
Hold on. We'll be right back after this quick commercial break.
When you used to
the Premier Rewards Gold Card from American Express, the rewards points can keep on multiplying. Buy 3 with triple points on airfare. Buy 2 with double points on gas and groceries. And a single point for pretty much every other dollar you spend on the card. Then, start choosing from over 1 million rewards to redeem all those points. Apply today and the annual fee for the first year is on us. Call 1-800-AXP-GOLD or visit AXPGold.com. The annual fee for the card is $175. See terms, conditions, and restrictions at AXPGold.com.
When it comes to pioneers in their respective industries, we all know the Apples, Starbucks, and Trader Joe's of the world. In the realm of recruiting, Decision Toolbox is the industry's best-kept secret. With 90% of their business from referrals and repeat customers. For over 20 years, Decision Toolbox's U.S.-based team of recruiters, sourcers, professional writers, quality personnel, and tech support has perfected a Six Sigma approach to talent management. No matter the size of the project, Decision Toolbox delivers incredible results. A cost per hire less than half of what contingency firms charge, with the winning candidate presented in an average of 14 days, all with a 12-month candidate warranty. With results like that, Decision Toolbox won't be a secret for long. Visit us at www.dtoolbox.com for more information.
Welcome back to the Talent Talk Radio Show. Don't forget, you can tweet your questions live right now to @PeopleG2 and use that hashtag, all one word, Talent Talk. We've had some really good questions come in through the Twitter feed. We're still looking for the creme de la creme. So if you have some, please send them our way and we'll try to work them into the show. So getting back here with Marshall Goldsmith, so far we've been learning a lot, and I'm sure many of you, like myself, are taking some good notes. The next question I had for you, Marshall, was, what should we, those of us that may define ourselves, if that's even a good term, as lifelong learners, maybe what should we be tuned into right now that's maybe kind of going on right now in corporate America, or is maybe the next wave of learning or things to be looking at? Is there something kind of coming down the pipe that you might tune us into?
One thing you need to be aware of is new types of learning. I'm doing a new video every week now for 50 weeks. I don't know if you've seen any of them yet.
Yes, I have. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's available through my website, or you can get it on Thinkers 50. My good friend Elliot Macy is a world expert on e-learning, and he said the author of the future is a video producer. So I think there's a lot of truth to that. I think you're going to see a whole lot more short videos, things that can be done in a very, very short period of time. That's going to rise up more, and what you see less of is people buying books and selling and reading books.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just I'm not making a value judgment. It's not necessarily good or bad. It just kind of is. It's a different world out there. So I think, it's very important for us to adjust to the new world.
Yeah, and we've definitely seen that with video. And to be honest, not trying to be self-serving here, but we've seen that with our show as well with the audio. So it's been amazing that people want to interact with things in a different way than just books or just blogs or wherever they're getting their content. But it always does seem to be a nice stepping stone. So they come in through one avenue, and that it still leads those who are the most interested and the most engaged back to books in the long run, whether they be audiobooks or traditionally read books. But it does seem like the Twitter world has really pushed more content into that quick snippet, get an idea, is this for me or not? Is this what I want to learn or not? And before they spend the time and money to buy a book and to read it through its entirety, they want to get exposed to that idea.
Right.
We've certainly come up with a couple different things that we've talked about here today, and looking at those different learning types, I think that's a really, really important thing that we're seeing. I mean, we know our clients want to learn different ways, our employees want to learn in different ways, and so Marshall's saying he's seen that as well. So maybe to kind of go a totally different direction, I know when I came down and had the nice walk with you a few months back, you spoke a lot in great detail about your connection to Buddhism. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit about that and how that impacts your view on business and coaching and life in general.
Well, as we discussed, there are many schools of Buddhism. So when someone says they're a Buddhist, it doesn't really help you very much, because Buddha said, only do what I teach if it works for you. Mm-hmm. If it doesn't work for you, just don't do it. Well, if you look at Christians, the difference between a Protestant, a Southern Baptist, a Catholic, Unitarian, they're pretty big. Mm-hmm. Differences in Buddhism can be even bigger.
Right.
So people who say they're Buddhist can be legitimately Buddhist, yet have very different ways of interpreting Buddhism. My school is a religious school. It's a philosophical school. And my school could be summarized very simply, be happy now. This is heaven, this is hell, this is nirvana. It's not on the outside somewhere, it's on the inside. And the essence of life is learning happiness, peace, and contentment where we are. In my coaching, I practice something called feed forward, which I love feed forward. It's very Buddhist. Again, you learn to ask for ideas, listen, think about the ideas, thank people, don't judge or critique, never promise to do everything people say, and follow up. And that's a very, very Buddhist concept because it doesn't involve judging people or proving people are wrong. It's a process that really lets you focus on learning from people. So I use a lot of Buddhism in my work. And by the way, I am not a religious, a philosophical Buddhist. Anybody can practice the type of Buddhist philosophy I can. If you're a Christian or Muslim or whatever you happen to be from a religious point of view or an atheist, you can still use Buddhism in the same way I use it.
It's certainly fascinating. I think you had told me you read, not every book that's out there, but you certainly have read a lot of books on Buddhism and seem to have a very, very deep knowledge from all those different aspects that really seems to emanate both in your approach to the general public, to your coaching clients, and I think it's really unique in how it ends up going forward. Now, you mentioned that feet forward principle. Maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Well, I do a class. And when I teach classes, I almost always do the feed forward exercise. So I'll stand up in front of the group and say, group, we're now going to practice something called feed forward. In feed forward, you're going to be in two roles. Role number one is called learn as much as I can. And I always say, are there smart people in this room, yes or no? And everyone says yes. So I say, now's your chance to learn from these smart people. Then role two is called help as much as I can. Then I say, are there nice people in this room, yes or no? And everybody says yes. Well, there's a chance to help these nice people. And then in feed forward, there's going to be two rules. Rule number one is no feedback about the past. I always say we spend too much time talking about the past. Have you ever been impressed with your wife, husband, or partner's near photographic memory of your previous sins, which have been documented and will be shared with us in a repetitive way? But you know what? We can't change the past anyway. So one rule is no feedback about the past, and two, you can't judge ideas or critique ideas. So I have people talk to as many people as they can in a manner that's positive, simple, focused, and fast. And they say, my name is, I want to get better at, and whatever they pick to improve needs to come from their heart. And they say, please give me ideas for the future. People give me ideas, I say thank you. The other person says, my name is, I want to get better at, thank you. They talk to as many people as they can. Then at the end of the exercise, I say, give me one word to describe this exercise. And people say, this exercise was invariably positive, useful, helpful, or even fun, no matter what country I'm in. Then I say, well, what's the last word you think to describe any feedback activity? Fun. Anyone ever call you on the phone and say, I have feedback I'd like to share with you? Come into my office and you said, fun.
Right.
Fun is the last word you think of. Get people to find this exercise as positive, useful, helpful, or even fun. So I say, why? And I say, well, it's fast, it's non-judgmental, it's positive, it's focused on what I can do, what I can't, creating a positive future, not reliving a humiliating past, and no judging. So anyway, it's a big essence of how I do coaching. Feed forward is kind of one of the centerpieces of my whole coaching process.
Well, I think you're also hitting on a really important area that most people really struggle with, and that is whether it's regret or it's that fear of repeating a past mistake. Regardless of where you are on the food chain within an organization, I think everyone can empathize with that you kind of live your life a little bit thinking about those things, and that exercise is more completely focusing away from that and only on those future events. What's the most positive outcome? I mean, I forget the quote, but it's something like, if you knew you couldn't fail, what would you try to accomplish? It's that kind of a scenario. So, when you're not writing or speaking or coaching or discussing Buddhism or all the different things that are going on in your life, you know you have a family as well, but I assume you pick up a book or two from time and again, and maybe recently I'm hoping you might have had a book that you read that you might suggest to our listeners.
I'm going to give you a recommendation I like.
Okay.
And you mentioned Buddhism. This is a Buddhist book by an author named Thich Nhat Hanh, Thich, Nhathanh. And the name of the book is called Old Path, White Clouds. I love this book, Old Path, White Clouds. And it looks like a huge book, so it might be sort of intimidating to look at. It's really easy to read. It reads like children's bedtime stories almost. And it's a wonderful, really positive, upbeat kind of a book. So I highly recommend it.
Well, that sounds like a great book. It's a reminder to our listeners, we do all of our guests' book suggestions up on our talenttalkradio.com page. You can always get them there or on the blog. We always have those great suggestions there, so we'll add this one to the great list that we have started. Sounds like a great book. If we can go back in time a little bit earlier in your life, before the things that you mentioned, maybe even before you were a professor and a dean and all that, I'm going to assume that there might have been some important people or events in your life that really impacted your views on leadership. Could you talk about one of those or people or events?
Sure, I can give you a few of them.
Great.
How did I get into executive education? Purely by accident. I met a very wonderful man named Dr. Paul Hersey, one of the inventors with Ken Blanchard of situational leadership, and he was kind enough to let me follow him around when I was young and watch him do what he did, and I tried to do what he did as a teacher, and then one day he became double booked. And he said, "Can you do what I do?" I said, "I don't know." He said, "I'll pay you $1,000 for one day." That was 37 years ago. I was 28 years old. $1,000 for one day 37 years ago, that's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
I said, "Sign me up, Coach." I did a program for the Metropolitan Life Insurance Company. They were very upset when I showed up. Turned out to be very successful. They called Paul up and said, "Send Marshall again." That's how I got into executive education. And, he totally changed my life. He taught me about teaching. Other people have changed my life. Frances Hesselbein, former CEO of the Girl Scouts. I was, in theory, her coach, but I learned about 20 times from her what she learned from me. Peter Drucker said she was the greatest leader he ever met in his life, which I don't debate. A wonderful and inspirational woman. Peter Drucker, I was on his advisory board for 10 years. Had a wonderful opportunity to learn from probably the greatest management thinker in history. And then another person I've learned with is my friend I talked about, Alan Mulally, who I'm having dinner with on Sunday. Fantastic leader, got ranked number 3 greatest leader in the world last year, behind only the Pope and Angela Merkel. Again, has taught me 10 times what I ever taught him.
So what are some of the lessons that he's taught you recently that we might share with the audience?
What he's taught me is a couple of things. One, I've already mentioned, don't make it all about yourself. Don't get lost in your own ego. Leadership is about them. Really focus on being a servant leader, that you're there to help them have a great life. Also, everyone loves him. The secretary, the driver, the janitor, the executive, everyone at every level loves this guy. He's just a wonderful person. And that goes a long way. And some other lessons I learned from him are the importance of structure and discipline. I mean, of all the people I coached, he improved the most. I spent the least amount of time with him. Why? He understood that my coaching process was indeed a transferable process, and he put together structures and discipline in place to make sure that it got done. Well, he has developed a process and he used in Ford that's unbelievably effective, called the weekly review process. And every week they go through this very structured discipline process, and the results have been obviously fantastic. The stock went from 1 to 17. The company was near bankruptcy, ended up being very successful. He was the CEO of the year. Fantastic process. Most people can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the daily question process. It involves a weekly discipline that involves looking in the mirror, dealing with important priorities, facing the reality of performance week after week after week, feed forward week after week after week. Most people can't do it because their egos are too big.
Right.
He does it. Why? He realizes that in life, if we don't have structure, then we have to rely totally on things like memory and self-discipline. And none of us are that self-disciplined, and none of us have a perfect memory, and we forget things, and we get tired, and that's why we need help. And, to me, the greatest leaders are not people who think they're above needing help. They are happy to get help.
Yeah, those the sort of people who want help, want to learn, want to achieve, and help those around them as well, right?
That's right.
So, and what about Peter Drucker? I mean, you've brought his name up a few times, and I'm not kicking myself, but we never went a little further here. I mean, some of his ideas and things that he's taught and developed, I think, is some of the really most time. I mean, they've really kept. There hasn't been a lot of things that have come around that have ever really diminished, his teachings, the things that he really brought forth. I mean, you can go back and read one of his books now. It's just as good as it was then as it is now, in my opinion.
Right.
What are some of the big lessons that, he taught you?
Well, Peter Drucker taught me one lesson that I use constantly in my coaching. It was probably a third of my coaching practice this year. Every decision in the world is made by the person who has the power to make the decision. Make peace with that. Not the best person, the right person, the smartest person, the prettiest person, the fair person, or even a sane person. Every decision is made by that person. Decisions are made based on power, not on logic or rationality. Very few people in life really understand this lesson. For example, how many times have we gone through life saying, I'm amazed that someone at that level, followed by his crazy, weird, does dumb things, or acts like an idiot? Well, why are we amazed? You ever read a history book?
Mm-hmm.
Look at the history of the world. Many decision makers are insane people. Well, they're still decision makers. Peter Drucker also taught me our mission in life is to make a positive difference, not to prove how smart we are. Most of us never learn that point. And in life, before I deal with any topic, I should breathe, think, and ask myself a question. Am I willing at this time to make the effort required to make a positive difference on this topic? If the answer is yes, go for it. If the answer is no, take a deep breath and let it go. Most of our lives are wasted on things we're not going to change anyway. We complain about the weather, the traffic. We complain about our bosses. We complain about politicians and movie stars. We're not living our own life.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to make a difference, number one, live your own life. Don't live Lindsay Lohan's life. She used to be my neighbor in New York. And number two, focus on where you can make a positive difference. Don't waste your energy if you're not going to make a positive difference.
Yeah, and those are some powerful things that, when you hear them, they just click. But as we've kind of gone back to a few times today, it's tough to do.
Oh, yeah.
And to put in, and that gets back into that structure, and you need that structure so that you don't have to rely on that memory or self-discipline. And I can tell you, when you said that, the light bulb in my head went off. That I think lately I've been relying a little too much on memory and self-discipline, and I probably need to push in a little bit more structure to balance that out, because that's and it's tough to do, though, really tough.
Well, it's humbling to admit that we need help.
Yeah.
I mean, as I said, how many people would have somebody call them up on the phone every day and listen to answer questions? Not too many. Well, I'd be embarrassed.
Mm-hmm.
There's a great book called The Checklist Manifesto by Dr. Atul Gawande from Harvard Medical School. And, it's very sobering. If a nurse asks a doctor a series of very simple questions from a checklist, the odds on unneeded infection plummet, and the death rate because of unnecessary infection is cut by 2/3. The huge majority of hospitals around the world do not allow the nurse to ask the doctor the question. Why? Ego.
Right.
According to Dr. Gawande, more people have died because of the egos of medical doctors than died in the Vietnam War, the Afghan War, and the Iraqi War combined. Too much ego. Why? They don't want to admit that they need help. What's the first question? Did you wash your hands?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I remember I saw a speaker that, it might have been from UCLA, that I think they utilized that program and put that in. It was amazing that, allowing those nurses, allowing everyone involved in the process the right and the opportunity to ask those questions, to really, focus on patient care, dramatically, like you said, plummeted the amount of infections and problems and mistakes by not having that sort of hierarchy there when it comes to those types of things.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I've noticed about people that are really successful is they seem to have a high amount of discipline. And now, just in hearing you talk, I'm wondering if that maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe what they have is a high amount of structure.
Well, it's a combination. Because when you have structure, you don't have to have self-discipline. If you can provide needed structure, you don't have to rely on memory and self-discipline. David Allen is the world's expert on getting organized. He always jokes around and says, the reason I'm the world's expert on getting organized, I'm lazy. I don't have to try to remember everything.
Mm-hmm.
I want to use my brain for creative learning. I don't want to use my brain to memorize trivia.
Right.
Well, Liz Smith is a CEO of Bloomin' Brands, one of my great clients, formerly president of Avon. Her company, they own Outback, Fleming, Roy's, and she has a highly structured process for menu selection because, what she does is her menu is selected based on what her customers like, shockingly. She found out if she doesn't do this, a lot of the big leaders will just taste stuff and say, I think that tastes good, let's put it on the menu. And what she points out is, who cares what you think? You're not the customer.
Mm-hmm.
We're not here to serve you. We're here to serve our customers. So she has a very structured facts and data mindset that really helps Why? She's putting stuff on the menu that the customers want. And she doesn't have leaders rely on their own taste, which may or may not have anything to do with the taste of their customers.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And I want to hear more about that. We're going to take our last quick commercial break, and then we're going to finish up here with Marshall Goldsmith, our guest here for the entire hour. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Imagine what it would feel like to lose everything. Your job, your home, your family, your dignity. This has happened to thousands of the men, women, veterans, and young adults we serve at Working Wardrobes. What do we do to help? We provide career development services, life skills workshops, job skills training. We provide the perfect interview outfit, and we get clients placed in jobs. Call Working Wardrobes, 714-210-2460. Donate, volunteer, invest, hire.
Can we talk about your family business? You know, that thing you put your whole life's blood, sweat, and tears into? Well, what happens when you retire or try and pass that business on to your children? At Succession Strategies, we can help you find the answers. We'll guide you through the unsettling process of protecting your family legacy and successfully passing your business on to the next generation, safely and securely, ensuring that it'll both survive and thrive for generations to come. So ask yourself just one question. Can I really afford to wait? Take the first step. Take our complimentary self-assessment at successionstrategies.com or call us at 714-560-9022 to set up a free consultation at your convenience. That's succession-strategies.com.
Welcome back. We're on the home stretch here of the Talent Talk radio show today, and we have a fantastic guest with us who's been giving us all sorts of great information and wisdom and sharing with us some great stories about his life and the great people he's worked with. Before we get back to the last few questions we have, just a reminder, you can subscribe to the podcast of this show and listen to past shows by visiting octalkradio.net or talenttalkradio.com and subscribe to have the show sent to you. Marshall, again, thank you for being here, and I don't want to tell secrets out of turn, so you tell me if we need to skip this question, but when I was down and we took that walk, you talked a little bit about what your new book was going to be about. And
sure, happy to talk about it.
Yeah, so you mentioned kind of that idea about employees having a responsibility to do something for the company. What can they do as opposed to what can the company always do for them? So maybe you can talk a little bit about that idea.
Well, I was at the presentation at the National Academy of Human Resources, and these are the top HR people in a lot of big companies, and 3 of the top HR leaders were basically given a mission, and there's tell the group everything you can learn about employee engagement. And these are very smart people, so everything they said was good. They talked about empowerment and training and, supporting people and good environments and good leadership. I realized as I listened, 100% of the dialogue was what can the company do to engage you, and absolutely 0 is what you can do to engage yourself. Well, as I listen to this, I'm thinking, wait a minute. Everything I said is great. They're just missing half of the point. I mean, I fly constantly on American Airlines, and I'm on a 3-hour flight. One flight attendant's positive, motivated, upbeat, enthusiastic. One's negative, bitter, angry, and cynical. Everybody's been on that flight. Well, same pay, same uniform. What's the difference? It's not on the outside, it's on the inside. That got me really focused on the concept of taking responsibility for our own lives. You know the famous John Kennedy speech, ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Everything on employee engagement was the reverse of the John Kennedy speech. It was 100% what the company can do for you and nothing what you can do for anybody.
Right.
So I'm sitting here thinking this is really training people in some odd way of thinking that they have no responsibility for their own lives. So I've now focused on teaching people a process to help them get focused on their own lives. And, it's worked shockingly well. And the new book I'm going to talk about, Triggers, really talks about the importance of getting us to focus on how we can make a positive difference and how can I take responsibility for creating the person I want to become in the future and not sit there and blame somebody else or wait for somebody else to create the new me, but take responsibility to do it myself.
Yeah, I almost have this visual of, someone on their very first day putting their feet up on the desk and saying, inspire me.
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe that should be the cover of your book.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but it's a fascinating idea that, I think there are people that do take responsibility. I think people listen to the show are taking responsibility. They want to learn something. They want to, be inspired or exposed to something they didn't know. But there are so many people within an organization where that's not the case. And certainly, I'm happy to hear that you're tackling that. And maybe that might be the next kind of big thing that we start talking about is how can the company help those that want that kind of thing, and how can you as an individual do that on your own or provide that back to a company?
I'll give your listeners the opportunity to participate in research. So if any of your listeners want to participate in this research, all they have to do is send me an email and just say, I would like to participate in your research. Every day for 10 days, they get asked 6 questions. Same 6 questions every day. Question number 1, and every question starts with, did I do my best to?
Mm-hmm.
Did I do my best to? Number 1, set clear goals. Number 2, make progress toward goal achievement. Number 3, find meaning. Number 4, be happy. Number 5, build positive relationships. And number 6, be fully engaged. Every day, did I do my best to do these 6 things? Set clear goals, make progress toward achieving those. Find meaning, be happy, build positive relationships, and be fully engaged every day. I've done 79 studies so far, 2,500 participants. The results are amazing. Just by getting people to focus on those 6 questions every day that start with, did I do my best? What have we learned in our research so far? Something like 37% of the people 10 days later say I'm better at everything. About 65% feel that they're getting better on at least 4 of 6. 89% say they got better on at least 1. Maybe 11% said no change, and something like 0.4% said they got worse. Why? Every day it gets you to focus not on what you cannot change. Every day these questions get you to focus on what you can change. And the one thing we cannot blame somebody else on is an answer to a question that starts with, did I do my best?
Mm-hmm.
Whose job is it for me to do my best? That would be my job.
And I think, you're right. The idea here is that maybe that we've gone away from that a little bit, that it's somehow the company's job to help you do your best as opposed to it being your job to do your best.
Exactly.
And so in doing our best, I'm wondering, though, if there might be a specific skill or technique that you feel really contributes to your own success that was maybe something you had to work on early on in your career to be better at.
Oh, I think Paul Hersey, who I mentioned, gave me some advice that I didn't listen to for 12 years. I was very successful. I made a lot of money and was doing well in teaching classes. And he said, you're too good at what you do. You're going to just go run around, sell days, make a lot of money, but you really won't make the sacrifice you can to do research and writing, and you won't be the person you could become because you're just too comfortable and you're too busy doing what you're doing. I basically lived that prophecy out for 12 years. If I had to live my professional life over, I would make that one change. I would have started much earlier focused on how can I make a difference. And it's interesting listening to you talk. What's the one thing you dinged yourself for? Not writing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's pretty easy when things are going well and you're successful to fall into what I call the good enough trap. I'm making money, I'm doing pretty well here, or good enough. And not really push ourselves to be what we could be.
Mm-hmm.
Because we're too comfortable. So just from talking to you, maybe that's not just my problem.
No, I think that's a universal for most people. It's really easy just to allow things to be good enough or to allow things to be distracting or difficult enough to keep you away from where you really want to be or envision yourself to be.
Or need to be, right.
Or need to be, right. I mean, it's huge. And in case anyone wants to be in that study, he did mention his email earlier. It's marshall@marshallgoldsmith.com. Is that correct?
That's it, and Marshall has 2 L's.
Marshall has 2 L's, so if you want to be in the research there, it's a great opportunity to send him off that email, and you can jump in there. We talk a little bit on the show about working creatively with teams. It does seem to be something that a lot of companies across the board really struggle with. And maybe that's some of the things you talked about us as leaders wanting to be the smartest one in the room or contribute to the idea. But do you have any suggestions on a very general level a leader of a meeting can do, let's say, just any leader, to get more creativity and more out of the people in the room?
Well, I've got an article called Team Building Without Time Wasting. If anybody'd like a copy, just send me an email or go to my website. Team Building Without Time Wasting. It's a very straightforward process. And you stand up in front of the team and say on a 1 to 10 scale, 2 questions. How well are we doing in terms of working together as a team? And question 2, how well do we need to be doing? The average team says we are a 5.8. We wish we were an 8.7. Then you say, okay, how can we close the gap? Then you practice feet forward. You say, let's look forward. What is one thing we could all do better to improve teamwork? And you have everybody pitch in and prioritize, pick one thing. You can't talk about people, only behavior. Then each person talks to each other person and says, for example, we've all agreed to be better listeners. So other than being a great listener, give me a couple things I can do better to move teamwork forward here in the future. No feedback about the past. And they say thank you. Then everybody has a list of things. You tell each person pick one. And you have a very simple 3-question follow-up process. And the process is each person says to each other person once a month, we all said we want to be better listeners. Give me one idea to be a great listener next month. 2, I said I want to be better at recognition. Give me one idea. And 3, I just want to be a great team player. Give me one idea to help me. Follow-up, 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 measurement. Follow-up, 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 measurement. You'll get more long-term improvement in team building doing what I just described than you will shipping people off to the woods for a month where they can hold hands and climb trees, but when they get back to the real world, nothing changes. Why? Follow-up, measurement, discipline, follow-up, measurement, discipline, and it doesn't take much time.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to commit here on the radio so that I have a reason to do it. That I want to do that feet forward exercise for sure in our next team meeting. I think that's going to be it's a really great way to try to engage everyone and to work forward positively and not worry about those things in the past, which I think is a really important part of what I think holds a lot of groups back, is constantly looking backwards at what we did wrong and who you can blame and what they said or didn't say, instead of how can I be better going forward and focus on those behaviors instead of on people or the past events.
4 words: help more, judge less.
Help more, judge less. Well, if you have gotten anything from today's interview, I hope that might be it, and I hope we've picked up a few more things. But Marshall, thank you so much for being our guest. We would love to have you come back anytime you'd like to talk about what you're doing or your next book. And we'll certainly, hopefully, our cross paths again at one of these conferences sometime soon.
Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you again to Marshall Goldsmith for being my guest for the entire hour. Tune in next week, 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, to hear Zing Shaw, U.S. Director of Diversity and Inclusion and the head of Southwest HR at Edelman. Until then, do what you love and show the world how talented you can be today.
You've been listening to Town Talk Radio Show, right here in Orange County's only community radio station, octalkradio.net. Brought to you by People G2.
would feel like to lose everything: your job, your home, your family, your dignity. This has happened to thousands of the men, women, veterans, and young adults we serve at Working Wardrobes. What do we do to help? We provide career development services, life skills workshops, job skills training. We provide the perfect interview outfit, and we get clients placed in jobs. Call Working Wardrobes, 714-210-2460. Donate, volunteer, invest, hire.
Welcome to RLF Radio, the only show that helps young baseball players and their parents prepare for high school athletics and beyond. Brought to you by the Ryan Lemon Foundation with your hosts, Dick Owens, Guy Lemon.
Good evening, everybody. This is Guy Lemon from the Ryan Lemon Foundation, and my cohort tonight